Hello, 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 hello. How is everyone today? Okay. I don't look too much like shit. How's it going, everyone? We're back for another edition of Cringing at Anarchism. So yeah, yesterday was very interesting. The video was, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. It wasn't a great video, and we reacted to it, and we saw and we discussed the ways in which Andrewism displays his historical ignorance. And I keep going back to the word, but it is the right word, idealism. He traffics in abstract phrases, all this fancy sounding phraseology, these idealist, cool sounding words. It's all fiction. He's writing cool sci-fi fiction, basically, with his videos. And so, yeah, the video just was, the thing that still sticks out in my mind was how he used one of the things that his entire video hinged around was forestry management and how states don't properly protect forests, including replanting forests. And he pointed to 3 failures of forest planning, tree planting, while ignoring the successes of China's forest planning, which have been hugely successful in a lot of ways, and which was the only forest planning thing, the only tree planting state exercise I'd ever heard of. So he found these other examples that I'd never heard of, that I don't know anyone has ever heard of states messing up tree planting, while ignoring by far the most famous example of tree planting, which is the Great Green Wall. I even remembered the exact name. I looked up the Great Green Wall. Was that what it was called? Let me see. Yeah, the Great Green Wall. And for some reason, he just happened to not talk about that. The most famous example of tree planting, where the state, despite its errors, has improved things. So, someone just said the Vietnam and DPRK also have successful tree planting programs. I wouldn't be surprised, because in terms of the nuance of reality, and under the USSR, Lenin and Stalin both had a decent one. Yes, there were environmental movements in the USSR that were also very unique for the time. In the 1920s, the Soviet Union was the most advanced environmentalist country in the world. And then things weren't great for a while, but then, there were some good stuff under Stalin as well. And then in the 1960s, things got pretty good again. So, yeah, I don't know about Laos, but I don't know about Cuba tree planting, but I know Cuba's environmental policy in general is great. So, yeah, we're getting off topic, which is because we're going to watch this video today. So his part 1 video was why states are bad. It was a terrible video. It was filled with straw men. It was filled with just historical ignorance. Go ahead and watch that if you think otherwise. I completely dismantle his arguments with facts. I actually go to the facts. I go to reality, and I debunk his arguments by looking at reality. Materialism. So, and again, I wouldn't be this hard on him if he wasn't making these arguments. It isn't just in a void that I'm acting this way. He makes these terrible arguments to attack Leninists and attack states, and he gets hundreds of thousands of views on these videos, and people So, anyways, though I'll be honest, the comments on this video were somewhat less positive than the last one, so this video might even be worse than the last one. Let me see. So, here were the questions I wanted to pose to Andrewism as we watch the video, and I want to see how many of these questions Andrewism is able to properly answer. So first of all, so these are common questions anarchists are faced with. They're questions anarchists can never answer. Or they can answer but insufficiently. So let's see if Andrewism can answer these questions differently. The first is, how will global supply lines function? The way the global exchange of goods and services works is incredibly complex. It's incredibly diverse. And under a socialist organization of a global supply line, it would be way better in numerous ways. But so I want to know how Andrewism would do, how Andrewism would handle global supply lines under anarchy. How will it be decided who does less desirable jobs like plumbing or janitor work? So under a socialist state, I haven't read too much on how this would work, but I think that, people do have different levels of competencies and different levels of aptitude at different things. So I would say, but I would think that everyone should do at least a little bit of this stuff, the kind of less desirable things, instead of just making like a few really unlucky people have to do all of this. But also, I've met some people, they're dumb as fuck. They're just hopelessly dumb. They can do that stuff, a lot of that. And then also, but they can also be given a decent quality of life, because the distribution of labor under socialism should be far more equitable than under capitalism, and no one should be worked to the bone, even if they're, a fucking idiot. They should, Okay, next, how will you defend yourself from outside threats? Socialist states are fucking great at this, They did a good job of this. Anarchists, not so much. They never did a good job. Well, not socialist states. Specifically, if I say anarchist state, that's a mistake or whatever, but that's just going to happen. Not socialist states, Marxist-Leninist states defended themselves from outside threats. Non-Marxist-Leninist states did an awful job of defending themselves from outside threats. They always got destroyed. There's Sankara, there's Allende, but then there's a lot of other examples that were like left-leaning or left-wing that also got couped. They weren't Soviet states. The Soviet states, Soviet-aligned states, those were the states that survived. Those were the states that didn't get couped. Soviet-aligned states. Okay, how will your justice system function? Soviet justice system went really out of control in the Great Purge and all that. Went way over the top. Sankara was ML oriented, but he was not aligned with the Soviet Union. He did not choose to align with the Soviet Union, and he did not. He was not aggressive in purging reactionaries from the government. He got assassinated by Blaise Compaoré or something, I think. But if he had actually had a strong security apparatus, and conducted, actual, some sort of fucking, just like anything to protect himself, because he didn't even want to do executions. There's a famous quote not long before he died where he's like, I'm thinking of executions because things are unstable. But he just didn't want to do that. How will your justice... I don't approve of executions. As a YouTuber, executions are bad. Trust me. Yes, please. But, but also the justice systems in socialist states can also be very good. Because it's actually about justice and a rehabilitation and all that, and prevention before crimes happen. Cuba is a great example of a country with very little crime, relatively. Vietnam has crime, but it's still pretty good in terms of crime. China, I'm pretty sure. Crime in China. It is going to be incredibly hard in a country like China to, prevent crime, but yeah. Okay, paywall, cool. But yeah, like Cuba is a good example of a low crime rate. Let's see, where was I? Okay. How will large-scale infrastructure projects like building a railway be coordinated and built? So, under social, or you call it whatever you want. Like in China, the incredible railway building project, which was incredibly, like, you need to think about what that railway actually did for people in rural areas, like what that means materially for their lives. That means tourists are able to easily access the area. That means they can more easily access hospitals, loved ones, all that stuff. These are positive material changes to people's lives. Of course, these things should be environmentally friendly and not destroy wilderness and all that. Obviously. What will prevent people from simply reestablishing a state, either democratically or autocratically? Quote Marx. So yeah. So there's many examples. There's fairly many examples of what's called primary state formation, or states that came out of nothing. I did a little more research on this, and there's like about 6 to 10 examples where there was never a state before, no one had ever heard of a state, and they made a state. So what will prevent people from simply reestablishing a state under anarchism? What prevents, a city of 1 million people going voting in a referendum? You know what? I like the old state. Let's go back to that. Or, I already know the answer to this. It's just going to be like, oh, well, we'll educate people about how, anarchism is the true way, man, But then, autocratically, what about if some guy tries to seize power and reestablish a state, So these are some of the main questions I thought of to see if Andrewism will properly address any of them. My assumption, my prediction is that he will not properly address any of them. But we'll see. Okay. So, without further ado, I think we should just get into it. How Anarchy Works, Part 2.
What if we didn't have bosses, politicians, borders, landlords, police, or prisons? There was a time when each of these things did not exist. And whatever you may believe now about their absolute necessity, have you considered that there can be a time again when we can do much better without them? Anarchists dare to desire a world without rule.
Mind you, Andrewism cannot and will not point to any examples where people have done better without them. He just can't do it because we looked at the closest example of a large-scale anarchist project in the Zapatistas, and despite their noble intentions, they have failed to materially improve many people's lives in any way like socialist states did. So this is just a pure, without any actual evidence to support his assertion. Right off the bat, he's making the claim, we can do much better. We could potentially, if you're a full-on communist and you think that that's a possibility, but of course Andrewism doesn't believe in a transitional state, even. He doesn't believe in that at all. He just thinks you need to have anarchism. But he also said, like, it's a long process, so it's interesting, like, I don't understand how that works. Like, he said anarchism isn't an instant, it's like a long thing, which is like what communism is. It's like a long transition to communism, so it's like, I don't know. You know, to be fair, none of the Marxist-Leninist states really ever started to dismantle their states much, so that's fair. But, like, there's just no examples of people doing much better with anarchy. So, I don't know. And people will be like, well, Catalonia, man, anarchist Catalonia. It existed for, like, a single year or something, and there just is not any actual ability to measure the success of that project when it was around so briefly.
Neither the rule of the minority, nor the rule of the majority. Neither the rule of the capitalists, nor the rule of the bureaucrats. Neither the rule of men, nor the rule of royalty, nor the rule of the elderly, nor the rule of warlords. Anarchy. Without rule. The world around you illustrates the consequences of a life under archy, under rule. Do the details of the crises playing out before our eyes even bear repeating? By now we should realize that there is more to life.
Yes, that is capitalism. That is capitalism. Because we have plenty of examples of anarchists or of socialist states doing great, taking great leaps and bounds and measures to reduce pollution and fight climate change and help the environment. That's capitalism. That's not just states in general.
And this. By now we should know that there is something wrong with a life of endless toil, soothed by commercial distractions, for the power and profit of authorities, while the earth cries out and her children weep for lack of a future. How much longer do we let these rulers run our world to ruin? These are the social...
It's just a empty populist agitation. That's all it is. It's empty populist agitation by a guy who just did not find the right books when he was growing up, and now he's fully locked into anarchism, and he's got to keep going, you know? He can't turn away now. I mean, he can, that's the thing. Non-compete did. Plenty of anarchists do. They turn away. It hurt Non-Compete's channel pretty bad, you know? But he's principled. He out of principle, he turned away from anarchism. It's possible.
Political, economic, and environmental consequences of a life under the rule of capitalists and statists. Beyond individual rulers, these are the consequences of hierarchical systems. Those above have the power to command obedience.
But there's plenty of evidence that it's not just the consequence of hierarchical systems. There's plenty of evidence of hierarchical systems. There's plenty of evidence of hierarchical systems not doing bad things. I mean, again, let's go to the freaking social democracies. They are built off of imperialism, yes, and I'm not saying the social democracies are perfect, but they give full health care from cradle to grave. They give huge, especially Norway, you know, does a ton of things. Their rehabilitative justice is insane. They put, like, serial killers in, like, mansions. I think I'm exaggerating, but, you know, like, that guy that mass fucking murdered like 60 socialists in a mass shooting was given like 20 years in prison or 30 years in prison. Like, they're extremely kind to their citizens compared to like most other places, even though they are built off of imperialism. And I'm not saying they're perfect at all, but so he cannot reckon with this because Andrewism has to make these grand, sweeping, absolute statements about hierarchy. It's just like it's so dishonest. I don't think it's dishonest. I think he is subconsciously like broken. This guy's brain is, and maybe anarchists in general, their brains are broken, fundamentally broken, when they can just ignore all the good things that states can do. States can build roads, they can build schools, they can build hospitals. Yes, they can build prisons, they can build tanks. But you just ignored the prisons, and you just ignored the schools and the hospitals and the roads. Why are you doing that? You know, it's pure ideology, as Zizek says, even though I don't like Zizek. It's just like, it's not materialist. It's just, he's ignoring things that go against his beliefs. He's completely ignoring anything that is inconvenient to his argument. So he just says, hierarchy, it causes all these bad things. Yeah, it also does good things. You were just like, how do you have 200k subs? How does anyone for a second buy this shit?
Through police, courts, prisons, schooling, taxation, property, and other systems of control, and those below can only submit.
But he won't point out the good things that states do, because that just completely collapses his argument that hierarchy is only bad.
Hierarchy is among the greatest obstacles to the full realization of a free and fulfilling social life.
The industrialization in Soviet Union and China liberated countless millions of people. That gave them literacy, it gave them better health care, it helped them live longer lives. There were bad elements, and innocent people died on the way, but there was countless good and positive elements that gave people a free and fulfilling social life. You can't argue that. You can't argue against that. Meanwhile, in Chiapas with the Zapatistas, they don't read. They can't read.
No one person or group sat down to design this world. It is a product of historical developments, material conditions, and
Remember what I talked about last stream, where he talked about... Remember what I talked about, where I talked about selective spectrumistics, right? He selectively offers nuance. When it comes to criticizing the states, he cares suddenly about material conditions. He all of a sudden seems to care about material conditions. I mean, it's just incredible. This is already amazing. I love this. I should do this all the time. I'm having a great time. He starts talking about material conditions. That's amazing.
social relations shaped by billions across time that have slowly, but not inevitably, entrenched specific systems of hierarchical power. Patriarchy, capitalism, the state. There's no reason to believe that this is the best we can do. The assumption that what currently exists must necessarily exist is the acid that corrodes all visionary thinking. Your ability to meet your needs, your ability to find belonging in the ups and downs of a free-forming social life, your ability to create and pursue life purpose, and your ability to explore the full spectrum of your potential is constricted by a life under rule. Anarchists dare to desire a world without rule, and for that, across the spectrum of politics, we are mocked, ridiculed, and defamed.
Good.
But this message is for the...
Good. Rightly so.
Those who see what I see, who want to seek out new horizons for the future of humanity, and a better way of life for oneself. For those, like me, who are ever seeking to learn and explore as much as possible. This message is for those curious about how we might organize anarchy. So, quick preface, this video is meant to be an intro for those new to the channel, and a continuation of this now 4-year-long...
Unsubscribed from me or unsubscribed to Andrewism? Don't tell me what to do-ism. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what anarchism is. There's a reason, there's a very, very good reason anarchists are often called children, or accused of being children. A huge amount of their beliefs are based on emotional, unthinking reaction. And Andrewism he's read a lot of books on anarchy, but so he's not like unthinking, he's thought. But he's created this very limited framework and this very limited viewpoint that he's only sticking to that viewpoint. Rather than thinking broader beyond the horizons of anarchism. He keeps talking about how, like, you know, we have to think beyond what we have now. But he's like, he hasn't bothered to actually think about what we have now fully in the first place. You have to think about the now deeply and fully before you can think about possible futures and future horizons.
Long project. At this point, I've made 81 videos, of which 74 are publicly available. In order, these videos have documented my learning journey in anarchism and an abundance of other topics, supported exclusively by the patronage of viewers like you. Thank you. My perspective has evolved with time.
Bro watches PBS. PBS moment.
Study, and experience. So just as I had to reevaluate some prior positions in the process of creating this video, my understanding right now is just that. A snapshot of my perspective as I write this in March of 2024. Also consider this video the lens with which you can reevaluate some of my previous work, such as how to start a revolution. I'm sure my perspective will continue to evolve with more time, more study, and more experience in the future, but here now, let's talk organizing anarchy. To do so, we must...
You know, that's nice that he talks about his experience evolving or his perspective evolving. Dude, you need to read non-anarchist books. You need to stop only reading... You need to leave the anarchist library behind. Which I think the anarchist library is fucking weird, by the way. There's like pedo shit on here and like a bunch of weird shit. But you need to get off the anarchist library and you need to read Michael Prenti and Vijay Prashad, and you need to challenge yourself, actually, because all you're doing by reading this stuff is you're actually just not challenging yourself. You're just building a deeper and deeper bubble of delusion and ahistoricality. Thank you, Will Allis. Not to mention the geographical distribution of overall interest in anarchism. Is there an actual poll or something that shows that? Because if there's like a data or like a chart that shows that distribution, that would be really funny. I wish all anarchists would read the Jakarta method and then they'd stop being anarchists. Hello, revolutionary thought. Yeah, I think that would definitely help.
Let's first define anarchism, as it is widely misunderstood by non-anarchists and even some self-identifying anarchists. Although, to be fair, quoting anarchist Sean Wilbur, as long as there's been something called anarchism, anarchists have been struggling to define it, and, as often as not, they have been in struggle against other self-identified anarchists. While the term originated with Pierre Joseph Proudhon in Europe in the 19th century, the burning desire for freedom from rule that inspired it can be found across continents and eons. Anarchism is the term given to the political philosophy and practice that opposes all hierarchies, along with their justifying dogmas, and proposes the unending pursuit of anarchy, a world without rule where free association, self-determination, and mutual aid form the basis of our society. By hierarchies, anarchists are referring to the stratification of society which gives some individuals, groups, or institutions authority over others. In this context, authority refers to the recognized right above others in a social relationship to give commands, make decisions, and enforce obedience. But why is it that anarchists oppose authority? Well, the main issue is that hierarchical authority divides society between rulers and ruled, with harmful consequences for both. It is not that anarchists assume that human nature is all good all the time, but rather, as anarchist Peter Kropotkin argued in Are We Good Enough, both rulers and ruled are spoiled by authority, and both exploiters and exploited are spoiled by exploitation. Anarchists admit the imperfections of human nature, but we make no exception for the rulers. When the interests of rulers are prioritized above all others, everyone suffers. Those at the top might enjoy power and privilege, but their narrow position impedes the flow of information and insulates them from the experiences, ideas...
You know, I mean, this is just completely dashed to the rocks when you consider China and Mao's Go to the People program, where Chinese bureaucrats would go out into the fields and to meet the peasants and go to the farms and actually go to the people. They weren't insulated. That was the whole point of the program, was to make them non-insulated. And I wish the Soviet Union had a similar thing, but I don't know that they did specifically. Although you would have party officials go out, but I don't think it was as institutionalized as in China. Xi Jinping, I believe, did this when he was young. He worked in the fields, or he worked in a peasant farm when he was young, I believe. Let me see. The Wikipedia page for Xi Jinping, by the way, makes him seem like the actual coolest motherfucker ever. Let me see. Yep. They went, even though Xi Jinping's dad was like a high-ranking Chinese official, he still went to the countryside and lived with the rural poor. He ran away to Beijing. He was arrested during a crackdown and sent to a work camp to dig ditches. That's incredible. This guy was the son of a high-ranking Chinese bureaucrat, and he was not given special privilege. He was literally fucking arrested and made to dig ditches. So, again, Andrewism, you're historically illiterate, and we can see in the countless examples of socialist states being connected to the people. The down to the countryside movement. Certain privileged urban youth would be sent to farming villages. Super great program. Really, really great program. In my opinion, one of Mao's best ideas. He had a lot of good ideas and a lot of bad ideas. They made him stay in a cave house. Oh my god, that's incredible. That's freaking incredible. Xi Jinping was put in one of these things. And Andrewism wants to pretend that China won't ever connect, or states never connect high-ranking people to the rural people. The current premier of China was made to stay in one of these things. Okay.
And perspectives of those below them that can contribute to everyone's well-being. Those at the bottom are compelled to obedience and subordination by a system greater than themselves, which fosters dependency and erodes our capacity to self-organize without authority and control our own destinies. Not to mention, hierarchy creates conflict, as authorities compete for control, subordinates compete for scraps, and authorities and subordinates clash over their opposing interests. One seeks greater power over, as the other seeks greater autonomy from.
In the Zapatista territory, in my first lecture, as we discussed, the Chiapas is ruined by crime. People are being constantly murdered. It's riddled with drugs and drug traffickers. So, if hierarchy creates conflict, I don't think a lack of hierarchy, you have not provided the evidence that a lack of hierarchy does not create conflict. So, yeah.
For these reasons and others, anarchists oppose authority, whether it's found in the spheres of society, economy, or politics. In order to organize anarchy, we need to be crystal clear about authority. There's no such thing as a universal and constant definition of any term, as meaning is constantly determined by our usage and debates over usage. Authority has been defined in many ways and contexts, but historically, anarchists have used it to refer to relations of command and subordination. I would argue that this definition is usefully specific, so we need to disentangle the authority that we oppose from the concept that it has come to be jumbled with. In various conversations, I've seen authority and hierarchy get confused with force, violence, expertise, influence, respect, and coordination. None of those concepts on their own necessarily grant authority, as in the recognized right above others in a social relationship, to give commands, make decisions, and enforce obedience. Authorities might use force or violence to maintain their authority in certain cases, but the use of force or violence alone does not bestow authority. Using force to pull someone out of traffic doesn't make you an authority. As for violence, the ruling class and other authorities don't even directly carry out violence, at least not usually. That is the work of their subordinates in the police and military whom they authorize to use violence. It is the ruling class's recognized right above their subordinates to command that violence in a hierarchical power structure that gives them authority. If that right was not recognized, and their subordinates did not accept subordination to their commands, then that authority could not exist. Which is why authority is primarily maintained by sheer inertia and social conditioning, rather than outright violence. Expertise merely refers to one's knowledge or skill in a particular field, but my understanding of CPR or ability to make shortbread cookies does not make me an authority over you. Other than the conflation of force and authority, this is one of the most common confusions people have about anarchism, made worse by the fact that there are some anarchists who still use authority to refer to both command and expertise, just because Bakunin did. Personally, I find that creates needless confusion. If you're using the word authority to describe everything from slavery to knowing how to build a bridge...
At least he's willing to criticize other anarchists. There's some anarchists who are just like straight up like will not, like just like basically do not believe in even criticizing other anarchists. Yeah, social anarchists are at least better than individualist anarchists, and I think Andrewism is a social anarchist, but as you can see, I mean, with just how much shit he just completely glosses over and ignores and gets wrong, social anarchists are still far from anything very trustworthy or accurate when it comes to reality.
Then why use the word at all? Just use the word expertise when you're talking about expertise. Listening to medical advice isn't a hierarchy. Having expertise doesn't give me the right to command you unless I hold a position in a hierarchical power structure that grants me that authority.
But hierarchical power structures can help people. Xi Jinping was higher ranked than the fricking rural peasants, but he went to the rural peasants and worked with them. I don't know. So we have a social anarchist in the chat. Your analysis of power is far more coherent than liberals. But okay, so I'm so glad there's an actual anarchist that I can actually talk to. What do you think about Andrewism saying that people cannot, or in a hierarchical, the high-ranking people, they can't go to the people and they're disconnected from the people, when literally in China, rich, powerful urban youths are made to, literally forced, like at gunpoint, to go into rural areas, and, not gunpoint, but Xi Jinping tried to run away, and they fucking caught him and made him dig ditches. So, what do you say to that? Is what I want to know. Yeah, something tells me my grandchildren won't want to attend daily meetings on the standardization of building codes. Yeah, I think Andrewism's take is a little more nuanced than that, but it just doesn't matter in the end because he makes so many straw men and he gets so much stuff wrong in his analysis that he's just not really trustworthy, in my opinion.
Authority. As Bakunin himself said, we ask nothing better than to see men endowed with great knowledge, great experience, great minds, and above all, great hearts, exert over us a natural and legitimate influence, freely accepted and never imposed in the name of any official authority whatsoever, celestial or terrestrial. On the topic of influence, as should be clear, the mere capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone is far more expansive than a relationship of command and subordination. As for respect, some authorities might demand respect as in obedience to their will, but no authority can demand that you feel respect.
I'm referring to the Down to the Countryside movement, by the way. Where high-ranking young Chinese people, they go to the countryside to meet the rural people, which I think is such a great idea. So yeah.
Respect for them, as in deep admiration elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. That is beyond their control. Finally, coordination might be more difficult to conceptually disentangle from authority.
Okay, so the anarchists responded to, he said, the more power is concentrated, the more information needs to be compressed. He would not be able to address people's issues as directly, accurately as people themselves. China built tens of thousands of miles of railway in like a decade. These railways very much helped a lot of people. Did they help every single person? Did no one get fucked over? Did some village maybe not get damaged or something? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe they did. Maybe some people got hurt by this railway. But a huge amount of people were helped by this railway. And that was by a top-down power structure. So actually, states are helpful because, yes, they're not perfect, but the people themselves, what the heck does that mean? Like, can they build tens of thousands of miles of railway in a tiny amount of time that can help people get to hospitals, to schools, to all of these, to see their loved ones, to find better jobs? Because let's be honest, no one wants to fucking live in a rural village. Not many people want to live in a rural village. Everyone wants to go to cities or towns. There's more opportunities. You know, there's cooler stuff in cities and towns than in tiny hamlets and villages.
But I don't think the act of ensuring that the moving parts in an activity work together effectively requires command per se. In fact, it doesn't need to be undertaken by just one person. It's something that multiple people can engage in. Coordination can be conceptualized in Anarchy not as making decisions for others, but more as information transfer in a free agreement between equals. This is qualitatively different from command, as it just involves supplementing the capacities of others with a shared commitment to the smooth execution of tasks by keeping track and ensuring that people are aware of what others are doing in a project. To reiterate, the point of this exercise in disentangling authority from concepts like force, violence, expertise, influence, respect, and coordination is so that we can preempt this confusion of concepts authorities like to use to naturalize their rule. If we don't grasp these distinctions, we're not going to be able to understand anarchism on its own terms, nor effectively resist hierarchy. With all that out of the way, we can...
Sure, but by that logic, capitalism has helped people too. What are we striving for here? Socialism or not? A train does not equal socialism. I don't like to debate what is or isn't socialism too much because people have very different definitions. China is basically state capitalist. I think China admits that they're state capitalists, basically, but they're transitioning to socialism, is what they say. Yeah, I mean, capitalism was an improvement over feudalism. And what these rural people are living in is sort of like a semi-feudalism, because sometimes at least. So, but capitalism is still a fucking awful system, as we can see. It's horrific, but we can see that states that are at least transitioning to socialism are helping people. A lot more than, because by that logic, capitalism has helped people too. Well, not really. All of the people whose lives have improved, the vast majority were in China and the Soviet Union. The capitalist system, they've improved people's lives a little bit, but nothing compared to states that call themselves socialist. Nothing compared to that. So, yeah, how can people in an isolated village get the resources they need to address their problems without getting the government involved? Yeah, it's like they weren't gonna just like build that railway by themselves. Show me a hierarchy that's ever dismantled itself. Dude, but we've already talked about how hierarchy is not the problem. That's what Andrewism is saying is the problem. But we see hierarchy being able to actually help people. Hierarchy itself is not the problem. It's how that hierarchy is structured And reducing that hierarchy, yes, it is important to reduce that hierarchy, but a hierarchy can help people. There's nothing inherently evil about just a hierarchy existing.
We finally begin to explore how we might organize anarchy. As humans, none of us exist in isolation. The dichotomy between the individual and the collective is a false one. The freedom and well-being of the former is inextricably linked to the freedom and well-being of the latter. We rely on each other for various aspects of our lives, and that reliance creates a web of mutual interdependence that forms the basis of any human society, whether hierarchical or anarchic. Hierarchical society creates norms, practices, and institutions that shape how we cooperate. The predominance of hierarchy, paired with our mutual interdependence, compels us to obey authority and participate in exploitative systems, whether we want to or not. Organizing anarchy will involve developing consciously anarchic norms, practices, and institutions that will reshape the way that we cooperate on the basis of our mutual interdependence without hierarchy. By recognizing our mutual interdependence, we can understand the concept of collective force, which refers to the combined productive power generated by individuals working together as a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. In the context of anarchy, your individual labor must still intermingle with others to accomplish tasks, but your labor does so without the imposition of hierarchy, as collective force is instead harnessed through free association. Free association is the founding principle of anarchic social organization and refers to the ability of each individual to move around and associate or disassociate with others as they so choose without being subject to authority. Free association empowers individuals to connect with each other and form groups based around shared interests or desired actions to pursue those interests or actions. Groups don't form without a specific goal in mind, whether that is maintaining roads, producing and distributing food, or building housing. In anarchy, the ability to accomplish anything is proportional to the will of free people to get it done. You cannot order someone else. Deciders and doers are the same people.
I mean, this is the classic. This just leads to the classic criticism, which is okay. So no one wants to pick up trash on the street. No one wants to be a plumber. No one wants to learn how to make glasses. No one wants to learn how to make insulin. Or so it's like. I think he'll probably try to respond to this, but we'll see.
Be done without subordinating people to the will of authority, it doesn't get done.
Read Roddenmouse, read Black Shirts and Reds. Start with Black Shirts and Reds, and then I should make like a reading list or something like that. Yeah, I think maybe I should make a video like that of like the books to read in order.
As a natural consequence of groups forming around existing points of consensus and intended goals, rather than trying to subsume diverse interests into a static entity that exists for its own sake, the social fabric is continuously altered as groups inevitably overlap, merge, split, and dissolve. Of course, forming groups around shared interests doesn't prevent conflict between groups, but since the escalation of conflict can upset the social equilibrium in unpredictable, potentially harmful ways, everyone is incentivized to prevent escalation and
Okay, so he writes, he has text here. We need each other to meet our needs, and the incentive to avoid harming each other lies in that recognition that harming others ultimately harms oneself. It's just not necessarily true. I mean, if someone sees someone else who's been more successful, if they plot a murder of that person and they get away with it, and that person happens to be like a brother or something, and they are the inheritor to that person's possessions, it doesn't harm them. It just doesn't harm them. If it's some kind of sociopath, it doesn't harm them. They get that brother's possessions, you know? Or two people are a common fucking ancient. We have so much, this has been forever, is conflicts over women or a mate. If you feel angry that you lost a girl that you wanted, you kill the other person to take that woman for yourself. I guess the anarchist system would like have some kind of justice system in place to prevent that, but it's just not true that some people cannot get benefit from harming others. It's just too much of a blanket, wide statement, I think. Chemical Mind, are you familiar with barefoot doctors in China? Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically like the Cuban system, right? Where the Cuban government and the Chinese government says, okay, doctors, go to rural, underdeveloped areas and serve the people, help them. That's top down, like, welfare. Um, yeah, so I mean, that's another example, Rod and Mouse, of states helping people, sending doctors across the country, the barefoot doctors. Same with Cuba, sending doctors around the world. That was a state, and it's been very successful and effective. And I don't see how Anarchy would do something like that better. I mean, I assume there would be like roaming doctors, but there would be no like guarantee that there would be roaming doctors. Like, you just have to hope that a roaming doctor under Anarchy like arrives, or you could ask for one, but there's no state coercion to make that doctor go to the village. Remember, Xi Jinping fled. He didn't want to go to the village. He fled, right? But then he was forced to go back to the village. And I think it was a formative experience for him, that he was actually made authoritatively to help the village, made to literally live in a cave.
A just-defined compromise. In the absence of legal order implied by anarchy, mutual responsibility informed by our mutual interdependence will guide our action. Since there is no authority to impose a set of rules and punishments, conflicts are resolved organically as they emerge. It's not that there aren't consequences, quite the opposite in fact. It is just that consequences are not predefined. Free association creates a social environment of constant negotiation and consultation where needed to avoid unnecessary conflicts. Because you can't form an entire settlement around a point of consensus, and because shared territory is...
That was so fascinating to me, because he had like ideas like the down to the countryside movement, and he had like great quotes like no investigation, no right to speak. And then he was also like, let's kill all the birds and we'll make iron in our backyard. And I love Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. And the Soviet Union is the great Satan. It's just like the most like double-sided good and bad ideas kind of guy I've ever seen.
Rather limited in its ability to unify diverse interests, it begs the question of what the commune even looks like in the context of anarchy. The anarchist commune can be easily confused with intentional communities or administrative divisions. But if we're going by Kropotkin's description in Words of a Rebel, chapters 10 to 11 make it clear that Kropotkin used the term commune to describe any group formed on the basis of free association. In fact, he juxtaposes the free commune with traditional conceptions of it, claiming for us, commune no longer means a territorial agglomeration. It is rather a generic name, a synonym for the grouping of equals which knows neither frontiers nor walls. The social commune will soon cease to be a clearly defined entity. Each group in the commune will necessarily be drawn towards similar groups in other communes. They will come together, and the links that federate them will be as solid as those that attach them to their fellow citizens. And in this way, there will emerge a commune of interests whose members are scattered in 1,000 towns and villages. Each individual will find the full satisfaction of his needs only by grouping with other individuals who have the same tastes, but inhabit 100 other communes.
So, if I just want to jerk off and watch anime all day, you can't stop me. You can't stop me. I choose to jerk off and watch anime all day and play video games. Because I have free association. You can't make me do anything else. That's what I choose to do. I don't think that's a very good system. I don't think that's a very fair or just system. I think that's the person that doesn't want to do anything, like exploiting the labor of others by just jerking off and playing video games.
Kropotkin's commune is essentially a fluid collective of individuals and groups, wherever they find themselves, coming together of their own volition and according to their shared interests, projects, and activities, without being bound by territorial designations. This is what distinguishes the anarchist commune from the municipal democracy of Bookchin's communalism. This commune does not require that the individuals involved subordinate themselves to some form of local government made up of the whole. In other words, a truly anarchist commune does not take on the polity form, but the concept and critique of the polity form may require further explanation. Wilbur uses polity form as a descriptor for more or less fixed, static associations or organizations that anthropomorphize social collectivities as bodies with the organs of direction placed in some head. He argues that this archaic conception of social organization tends to inform our understandings of the patriarchal family, the governmental state, the capitalist firm, the democratic people, and sometimes even the anarchistic commune, community, or federation.
Because in contrary to that, the people, in contrary to the idea that I just want to jerk off and watch anime, anarchists will say, well, that's not how people are. They'll all contribute. But at the same time, Andrewism says, like, we're not naive about human nature. I'm not saying that humans are all just good or whatever. But it's like, okay, then is there no one under anarchy who doesn't want to do anything? Just everyone under anarchy is like, I don't know. It's just like, you know, another thing I just realized, you know, what about disabled people? What about severely disabled? I'm talking like autistic, and not just the mildly autistic. I'm talking like brute, horrific, like bowling balls that can harm people. You know, someone has to take care of that just out of their own volition. What about when I guess assume the parents would, but what about when the parents die? The community just has to deal with that because you can't, I don't know, it's that kind of stuff is rough because it's not like it's going to be perfect under a state anyways, but it's like, I'm just imagining living in an anarchist commune, and I know a 6'8", severely autistic person, and they are a danger to other people. So I have to teach myself in my anarchist village how to deal with an autistic person, to not get the shit beat out of me, because we can't, like, I don't know. All of these might not be the best examples that I'm bringing up, but I think they're still worth addressing, you know?
As Wilbur points out, even when in a democracy or some forms of communism, the people at the top of the hierarchy is presumed to be the sum of the persons at the bottom, the doubling is almost always explicitly for the purpose of imposing the will of the whole on more recalcitrant parts. In other words, the domination of the minority by the majority. When we start with some abstract grouping like the community that may not necessarily share any real interests in common, and then place some decision-making system at its head that is responsible for identifying and enacting the will of this abstract entity, it tends to take a life of its own, often led by the group's most dominant voices, and subordinate real individuals to the will of the nebulous collective. Organized anarchy must involve breaking free of this polity form. The alternative...
Of course, some people would want to not work. Some people will always get away with that. I just don't think they should get away with that. I don't think, you know, some people should just just because it's what they want. I think they should be forced to do a little work. Like, I don't know, like, is that so, like, controversial? Like, is it so controversial to say, like, you can't just be a parasite on society and not help in any way? Like, I don't think, I mean, I don't think you should anyone should have to, like, break their back working. But I think they should offer something to society. If society is so advanced, if we have gay luxury space communism where like basically no one has to work anyways, then yeah, and everyone can jack off all day and watch anime and play video games. But like if some people are working their asses off and they're not liking it, it's stressing them out, but it's for a greater good. That's cool. So they like have health issues and pain from all this like working their ass off, but this other guy's just like chilling all day doing nothing, not helping anyone. Like, but there's no government, so we cannot do anything. We gotta let him, like, yeah, fuck that guy, he sucks, but that's just how it is. It's like, I think the appeal of anarchism to most anarchists is the ability to be a parasite. No, that is not true. Many anarchists work their asses off. However, yes, there are many anarchists that are complete. They are just fucking parasites. They literally just want to be parasites. They literally don't want to do anything, especially individualist anarchists. That's a great point, Pickles. That's an absolutely fantastic point. That's great. If everyone was engaged in productive work for the good of the whole society, then advances in productivity add to quality of life and could reduce overall work time for the masses. That's like Lenin, Marx type shit. It's like the more people actually contribute to making society better, the less people have to work. So the more people under anarchism that you have just jacking off and playing video games, the less people work. I mean, the less society is improved. And the more other people have to pick up their slack. How do we allocate the difficult and skilled work compared to comparably easy labor? I'm sure many Marxists have already talked about this stuff. I was sort of formulating my own ideas on this topic. I might release a video about it, but I have so much essays and so many ideas, and I need a video editor to help me. So if anyone is a video editor, they will be compensated. But I'm sure other people have talked about this, and there's like, the way I see it is like, people take tests in their aptitudes, and people who are genius level at like math, you put them right in math stuff, and then you like maybe do a little bit of like janitor work or something, and people who are not really good at anything or are okay at a bunch of things, you distribute them to do all those jobs. You do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. Or someone who's really good at writing, who's like a genius writer. Well, they mostly write poetry, but they don't just get to write poetry. They also have to do some less, at least a little bit, just to evenly distribute labor in an equitable and fair and just way. But you don't put a dumbass who's an awful writer as a poet if he does terrible in the poet test. You put that guy, if he's good at some sort of math, then you put him in the math. And I mean, even if he wants to do the poetry, well, you're not good at the poetry. You didn't do well on the test, but you did well on the math test, so you do the math test. You do the math job instead, mostly. And you can do a little bit of poetry on the side. So it's complex, but it's a very fair system of distribution of labor, where who gets to decide where to put which guy where? The tests. And people will say, oh, you know, tests can't be perfect. They're like, yes, tests are not perfect, but they're pretty good. They're pretty good gauges of people's competence. They're not like pointless. They're not like completely useless. So, yeah. Your system sounds horrible. I think I've heard enough. All right. I mean, you know, I just talked about how, you know, I mean, I've just spent the whole time, like, I don't know. People should get to do what they want to do. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, man. My system sounds horrible. Okay, well, you know, look at the Zapatistas where children are literally just impregnated because they don't have proper, you know, education on that, where people can't read more than in the rest of Mexico. I mean, I don't know, man. Anarchy is not working. It hasn't worked. There's no examples where it worked. Plenty of Marxists are actually thinking about real world solutions that aren't just complete stateless, you know, catastrophes. So also, this isn't something that I've thought about a ton or read the literature on a ton of, in terms of like how exactly distribution of like jobs or any of that would work. So yeah. I gotta shit on people in Mexico and bring kids into it. Dude, I'm just talking about... So Andrewism shits on states for endless hours in all of his videos. But see, this is the dichotomy where it's like anarchists can endlessly shit on states, right? But something like the Zapatistas, you can't criticize it. You can't criticize it because they're like indigenous and they rose up and that's all great. That's good. That's good. That's cool. But we can still look at their system and see that it's really shitty in a lot of ways because that's materialism. We don't just ignore the actual material results of the Zapatista system just because they have good intentions and there's good elements to them. That's just not how it works. People do this thing where you criticize the Zapatistas and they instantly go to like, you have no right to criticize another system. Why? I mean, that's silly. You guys can criticize states endlessly. You guys can endlessly talk shit about states, like Andrewism does, while ignoring all the evidence contrary to his argument. But in reality, the Zapatistas have incredible issues. What do you mean, what am I talking about? What did I not make clear? What did I not make clear, Harlequin? Let's hear it. I never said nobody will work without profit incentive. And I never said about IQ testing. What the fuck are you talking about? Why are you're fucking brain dead, dude. You're just completely brain dead. I never said any of that. do you think tests, do you think aptitude tests are some kind of eugenicist thing? Do you think that all humans are equally good at all things? Shut the fuck up. Don't say anything else. Just answer that question. Do you think all humans are equally good at all things? If you say anything else, if you don't answer that question, I'm going to ban you. Do you think all humans are equally good at all things? Because if you don't, then aptitude tests make perfect sense in terms of gauging people's ability. I thought the Zapatistas disavowed the anarchist label. They don't call themselves anarchists, but structurally, functionally, they are extremely anarchist in their nature. They are not what Andrewism defines as anarchists, where there's truly no... Dude, this Harlequin guy, oh my god, he really thinks that all people... He thinks that I'm not shit at math and good at writing. He thinks that I'm as good at math as Einstein. I mean, this is the kind of brains that anarchists have. This is the kind of people we're dealing with. They think that I am as good at math as Einstein. Right? Because if aptitude tests are somehow evil or eugenicist, like, I don't know. No, I don't think they can be made equally good. I don't think that's true. I don't think I could become as good at math as Albert Einstein. Or I don't think I could become as good at soccer as Lionel Messi. I don't think I could become as good at, you know... Oh my god, okay, so Harlequin truly does believe that Einstein was fully material constituted. There was not the tiniest bit of actual talent he had for math. It was totally just his education that made him what he did. I mean, that's just incredible. I can't not believe people think that. I cannot believe that people think saying that is eugenics. Like, it's just like, it's amazing. I believe genetics play a role in human development. Yeah, there's a mixture. It's material. You're materially constituted, but you're not just born with a clean slate. So because you can't be as good at those things mean you should be prohibited from pursuing them? That's not what I said. I said if you are terrible at poetry as a bad example, that shouldn't be your official job. You can do that on the side. And I should have been more clear about that. But, like, if you're amazing at math, or terrible at math, you shouldn't do that as your job. That's all I'm saying. You can do math on the side, but in terms of contributing to society, you should do what you're good at. Maybe I explained it poorly, but I feel like that's a very obvious thing. Like, but it's like, I was never going to be as good at basketball as Michael Jordan, you know? It's like, it's not just how reality works. Dude, Harlequin, you're a fascinating guy. You are a fascinating guy. I love you. I love your brain. That's fascinating. Harlequin actually believes that I could make the same achievements in math, even though I've been struggled my entire life with math, even though I was never good at it, even though I threw myself at it and it just didn't work compared to people around me that could do great. Yeah, poetry is more subjective than basketball. That's why poetry isn't the best example. I don't know, that's just fascinating to me. Oh my god, I understand now how Hassan gets angry at chatters. It's like, it makes, man, I get it now. I get it now. I gotta go back to the video.
The principle of social organization lies in federation, not in the sense of networking conventional static polities like a confederation of city-states, but instead bringing together the information and perspectives necessary to facilitate the dynamic process of free association. We'll explore how we can visualize this concept of federation later on, but now that we understand at least the basics of these concepts, we can take a moment to reflect on what falls short of organizing anarchy. For some time now, there's been a debate among anarchists concerning the idea of democracy. Historical anarchists have mostly abhorred it, but these days, some anarchists oppose democracy while other anarchists support democracy. Some say the debate is just a matter of semantics, others argue that it most certainly is not. Anarchist YouTuber Zoe Baker's video on anarchism and democracy is treated by many as having settled that debate. She concludes that modern and historical anarchists advocate the same core positions, and what many modern anarchists label as democracy without the state, historical anarchists just called free association or anarchy. For a long time, I considered myself neutral in this debate, indeed considering the distinction mostly semantic. I accepted Baker's conclusions and moved on. But since then, I've concluded through research that pro-democracy and anti-democracy...
Getting called out often makes people upset. I love this guy. Dude, I'm not upset. You are so funny. You think that I can do the same mathematical achievements as Einstein. That is incredible. I love that. I genuinely love that. That is so funny. Using an aptitude test would be a good tool to guide people, but limiting people to only work in those fields. Yeah, I need to think a little bit more about like what exactly I'm thinking about in that regard, because I haven't thought about it too much. Hey, Margaret Sorn, the literacy rate is actually worse than it seems. It's worse with the indigenous people. It's lower with the indigenous people. If you watch my first stream, I'm pretty sure at least I found a source that said that it's actually even... Chiapas is already the worst in Mexico, but among the I think it's like 40% illiteracy among the indigenous people in Chiapas. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to find this. Okay, let's see. Ballard Brief. Who is this? Because you got to check. You got to make sure you're not reading sketchy stuff. They don't cite it, but here it is. And I've seen this in other places, where 70% or more of the population speak an indigenous language, 55% are illiterate compared to the state's overall illiteracy rate of 13.6%. And this is the areas that the Zapatistas control, because they control the jungles. They don't control the towns or cities. The cities and towns don't want to be a part of the Zapatistas. They haven't made themselves. They don't want that. They've never voted for that. They've never let the Zapatistas into that level. So it's the jungles, especially where indigenous people live. That's where the Zapatistas are, and they haven't taught anyone to read. And then here's what I was talking about, how lots of children are getting impregnated higher than anywhere. Way higher. 75% above the average adolescent pregnancy rate. Also, the non-indigenous remain wealthier. Only 40% of indigenous complete primary school. Oh my god. Oh my fucking god. This is like even worse than I knew. That's horrific. Oh, and they have sites. They have sources, I believe, at the end, or... Okay, where? Oh, footnotes. Here we go. So yeah, they do cite all their claims. before people say they don't do that or whatever. They do cite their claims quite extensively. 304 citations. Some of it's just recitations, but like this is like as robust. Like this is like way over robust. This is insane. Dude, Andrewism, you lose, man. I mean, this is embarrassing, dude. Like, I go to the facts. And the facts are not in your favor, man. The Zapatistas are functionally anarchist in many ways, and they are not doing good. No one's going to school. The kids are getting pregnant. Everyone's very poor. Things are really not going well.
The anarchists are not, in fact, just describing the same thing with different language. I understand that democracy has some positive associations that some anarchists, myself formerly included, may want to latch on to a very misunderstood ideology. But I no longer believe that democracy can ever be truly descriptive of anarchy. To understand how I reached this conclusion, let's start with the definition of democracy. Now, democracy is a historically contested term, but it is also widely understood primarily as a form of government.
Anarchists in chat, what do you guys think about what do you think about a huge amount of children being impregnated and no one being able to read in an anarchist society? What do you think, Harlequin? Let's hear it, Harlequin. What's up, man? They can't respond to that. Like this Marco guy, he's just like making like jokes about me counting. He can't respond to the fact that the anarchists can't read. They can't, they can't get educated. They're very poor after the Zapatistas have been around for over 30 years. It's unfortunate.
By the whole population, typically through elected representatives. It is also used to describe the control of an organization or group by the majority of its members. Looking at its etymology, democracy quite literally means rule by the people. Demos, the people, and Kratos, the rule. As anarchist Peter Gelderloos recognized in his Reflections for the US Occupy movement, from the very origins of the democratic concept, rule by the people has always been a way to increase participation in the project of government, and the people have always excluded classes of slaves and foreigners, whether inside or outside of national boundaries.
Please, someone address why the Zapatistas have had 40 years, anarchists in chat, why have the Zapatistas had almost 40 years or so to create a society where people can learn to read, where people aren't poor in poverty, where people can get an education? I mean, that's, to someone that said that's one example, that's the reason I'm talking about the Zapatistas is because, first of all, Andrewism basically attacked Cuba, which is in a similar geographical area, and also because it's the only even remote example of a large-scale anarchist society. Even if it's not perfectly anarchist, it's the only large-scale example, and it's had huge failures. But, alright, I'm gonna move on. You're right. Alright, I'm just gonna watch the video now.
The question of freedom lies not in who rules, but whether anyone is ruled, or whether all are self-organizing. Anarchy means no rule, making it inherently incompatible with democracy on purely etymological grounds. But anarchist proponents of democracy use the term to describe either a particular system of direct democracy, or rather broadly as a synonym for making decisions, which is a rather unique use of the term. They argue that true democracy is direct democracy that exists outside of and against the state. But as the anonymous writers at Crime Think identify in From Democracy to Freedom, there are fundamental problems with this approach. Their main contention is that democracy has historically been used to describe government, and that history cannot be so easily erased through linguistic prescription. Furthermore, quote, any form of government requires some way of determining who can participate in decision-making and on what terms. Once again, who counts as a demos? And if there is no way of enforcing decisions, no kratos, the decision-making processes of government will have no more weight than decisions people make autonomously. Now, I can't speak on all pro-democracy anarchists, as I've seen them use the term to describe quite different systems, so I'll focus on just one established proponent of anarchist democracy. Not Graeber, because he defines democracy vaguely enough to include direct democracy, consensus, and basically any problem-solving that takes place in a group. Not Bookchin, because even he eventually realized anarchism wasn't compatible with majority rule and created his own ideology. Not Chomsky, because his grasp on anarchism is questionable at best. Instead, we'll look at the guy who consistently described anarchism as democracy without the state, Wayne Price. In Anarchism as Extreme Democracy, Price argues that while more areas of life should exist outside the realm of collective decision-making, where needed, such decision-making falls into a dichotomy of either minority rule, which he finds and opposes in both capitalist democracies and consensus systems, or majority rule, which he describes and supports as direct democracy. He argues in favour of majority rule with accommodations for minority rights, going as far as to state that minority rights are safest when the majority rules. But when minorities find themselves opposed to majorities, Price only offers them the option to voice their position and try to win a majority to their views. It should go without saying that despite Price's insistence, this system of majority rule does not describe anarchy. If hierarchy refers to a relationship of command and subordination, and if the majority commands the minority be subordinated to their decisions binding on the whole, then this direct democracy, while extremely participatory, is still a form of hierarchy. As Crime Think points out in the aforementioned article, the important distinction is not between democracy and the state, then, but between government and self-determination. Government is the exercise of authority over a given space or polity, whether the process is dictatorial or participatory. The end result is the imposition of control. By contrast, self-determination means disposing of one's potential on one's own terms. When people engage in it together, they're not ruling each other, but fostering cumulative autonomy. Freely made agreements require no enforcement. Systems that concentrate legitimacy in a single institution or decision-making process always do. It's true that some historical anarchists have ended up organizing along democratic lines. But the question here isn't whether that excuses us in the present to organize our way or not. The question is whether that mode of organizing gets us closer to the goal of anarchy. Does retaining that form of rule, however decentralized or participatory, get us any closer to a world without rule? As Proudhon recognized in his manuscript writings on Napoleon III, archy or anarchy, no middle ground. Archy can have one or several heads: monarchy, polyarchy, oligarchy, exarchy, heptarchy, etc. If the polyarchy is composed of the wealthiest or of the nobles and magnates, it is called aristocracy. If the people in mass is the predominant element there, it is democracy.
So someone said that Einstein failed to... Sorry, I wasn't fully paying attention to the video, but someone said that Einstein failed math, so my argument is mute, but he did not actually fail math. He failed to reach one standard in the part of the test, but he performed with distinction in physics and mathematics. So that's just not true. And also, under my system, that obviously is not fully created, and there might be other better things that other people have thought of, you are allowed to retake these tests. You don't just take the test once and you're cursed for life, because that would be an awful system. What if you're having a really bad day and you're not focused? You know, it's ridiculous to assume that would just... No, you'd have multiple chances to take an aptitude test.
Or several heads: monarchy, polyarchy, oligarchy, exarchy, heptarchy, etc. If the polyarchy is composed of the wealthiest or of the nobles and magnates, it is called aristocracy. If the people in mass is the predominant element there, it is democracy. But the number of heads changes nothing in the end. Early in his politics, anarchist Enrico Malatesta was in favour of majority voting within anarchist organisations when there was no consensus. Yet he still conceded that decisions should only be binding on those who favoured them. Later on, he would reject the rule of the majority entirely. Exactly 100 years ago, in 1924, he wrote, "Therefore, those who really want government of the people, in the sense that each can assert his or her own will, ideas and needs, must ensure that no one, majority or minority, can rule over others. In other words, they must abolish government, meaning any coercive organisation, and replace it with the free organisation of those with common interests and aims." Malatesta's position resonates with a slew of both historical and modern anarchists, as documented in the article Anarchists Against Democracy and elsewhere.
I mean, people have a lot of free association more than anywhere else on Earth in Chiapas, and it's almost like I feel like this is going to be boring, because it's like I can just point to again and again the extensive data to show that the Zapatistas have not been successful. Like, I can just keep going back to that and pointing to that, to like everything he says, because in practice anarchism has not been shown to be very effective.
Tasso Sagris argues that, quote, homogeneity is the ultimate imperative of any democratic procedure, direct or representational, a homogeneity that ends up as two final opinions, the majority and minority, losing the vast richness of human intelligence and sensibility, erasing all the complexity and diversity of human needs and desires. Anarchist Bob Black, meanwhile, lists as many as 18 solid objections to democracy, both direct and representative, in his article Debunking Democracy. As he concludes, neither version exhibits any clear advantage over the other, and each also has vices peculiar to itself. It's still free to advocate for direct democracy, but it's plain inaccurate to conflate it with anarchy, because the anarchist alternative to majority rule via direct democracy and minority rule via capitalist democracy is no rule, no democracy, just free association. Some of the pro-democracy anarchists might then argue that they are not in favour of majority rule. They do desire free association. They just use the term democracy for rhetorical purposes to refer to any egalitarian collaboration between people, with decisions not binding upon them. But again, without kratos, without rule, why even call it democracy, with all its connotations and baggage? I'm no longer convinced that the label democracy can be accurately applied to all forms of collective, egalitarian organisation. It might seem convenient as an entry point, but looking solely through its lens can also mislead and elicit further confusion about what anarchy actually entails. If we want people to actually understand anarchism, we have to challenge them to critically think about even their most cherished ideals. Democracy is a historically contested term, and everyone seems to want a piece of the pie. As Bob Black observed, for champions of capitalism, democracy is inseparable from capitalism. For champions of socialism, democracy is inseparable from socialism. Democracy is even said to be inseparable from anarchism. It is identified with the good, the true, and the beautiful. But although many good things, such as discussions, collectives, assemblies, networks, and anarchic federations, have been described as democratic, it may be better to...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Andrewism is like a social anarchist. He's really like... He is like a full anarchist. He is like anything. Any structure is bad. I mean, that's literally what he believes. He believes that anything that could be called a government is bad. Of the slightest example. So the Zapatistas aren't even close because they have municipalities or they have these organs and these systems. That to Andrewism is not what's needed. There needs to be nothing. Nothing that can be called anything. There needs to literally be nothing. Unless I'm misinterpreting, which is just like, he's like the most insane kind of anarchist. If I'm interpreting it right. He is the anarchist where it's literally, there can be nothing. There can be nothing of any sort of apparatus of the slight, even if it's super horizontal. So even if it's like a non-horizontal apparatus, that still isn't anarchism.
to view them outside that lens of governance. Perhaps we should look at the positive values that drew us to democracy in the first place, like egalitarianism, inclusivity, and self-determination, and take the time to properly evaluate whether democracy can effectively actualize such values. In the end, democracy is not the same as egalitarianism, inclusivity, or self-determination. Democracy is a historically contested term, but that doesn't mean it can be stretched to near meaninglessness. Words still mean things.
You'd think the Zapatistas would at least ally with Cuba, but I found nothing to indicate they bothered to network. I believe, actually, they released these like declarations of the Lacandan jungle and all that, and I believe in at least one, they did not denigrate Cuba, actually. They sort of somewhat defended it, at least. But yeah, Andrewism is literally, I mean, that's crazy, dude. I did not think that he was like that hardcore of an anarchist. Ugh. I mean, it's literally just childish. It's literally, it's not even, you can't even have a horizontalist structure. You have to have no structure, period.
Things. No matter how much you might try to rebrand it, democracy still refers to rule. As anarchist William Gillis argues in The Abolition of Rulership, etymology isn't destiny, but it does carry a strong momentum and corrective force. The language we use matters. And yes, anarchy is also a nebulous term to some, as is freedom, but, quote, the fight over anarchy is an inescapable one for anarchists, because the world we want will never be obtainable as long as the term's historical definition of chaotic, violent, dog-eat-dog situations of strong, albeit decentralized, power relations goes unchallenged. The battle over democracy is not so inescapable. We can afford to let go of democracy and
Hey, Shard Ninja. Why did you never actually think, if you think I'm a bad researcher or whatever for using Wikipedia, Why was I the one that had to actually tell you that the Zapatistas can't read? Why was I the one that had to tell you that the Zapatistas just let indigenous people impregnate children? Why did I have to be the one to tell you that indigenous people don't go to school and that they're extremely poor? Why did you never think to do that research on your own? And once you've thought about that, then you can pretend like you are in any way like in an authority to, you know, make fun of someone using Wikipedia. Because I actually go beyond Wikipedia. I use Wikipedia as a jumping off point, but I go well beyond Wikipedia. So the call is coming from inside the house, man. The call is coming from inside the house.
Popularize a far more descriptive and accurate term: free association. But wait, I hear you asking, what about consensus? Nearly 3 years ago, I released a video on consensus. Since then, I've been meaning to follow up on it. While I was aware of democracy's flaws back then and considered consensus a more valid alternative, I hadn't fully questioned some of my underlying assumptions. I still recommend that you watch the old video, as it does still hold up in some respects, but now, after 3 years of study, I have a few critiques of past Andrew's video. Starting from the beginning, I don't think my definition of hierarchy was precise enough. I defined hierarchy as any system or relationship of coercive power and domination. But these days I find it more useful to focus on the relationship of command and subordination, as I don't believe the term coercion alone accurately describes the dynamic most prominently at play. Moving on from that small quibble, in both the original title and description of my video, I referred to the process as consensus democracy. I've since corrected it because, unlike anarchist David Graeber, I don't think it's accurate to describe consensus as a form of democracy by equating all decision-making with democracy. I think it just creates further confusion, particularly with the implication of voting the democracy carries. If consensus is treated as direct democracy taken to its extreme, and one that was observed in the General Assemblies of Occupy Wall Street, as the writers of Crime think recognized in From Democracy to Freedom, for David Graeber, it was observed, particularly with the implication of voting the democracy carries. If consensus is treated as direct democracy taken to its extreme, and one that was observed in the General Assemblies of Occupy Wall Street, as the writers of Crime think recognized in From Democracy to Freedom, though David Graeber encouraged participants to regard consensus as a set of principles rather than rules, both the proponents of consensus process and its authoritarian opponents persisted in treating it as a formal means of government, while anarchists who shared Graeber's framework found themselves outside the consensus reality.
So, the consensus reality. Okay, so is he saying that the majority of people didn't want Graeber's idea? Because from what I remember, Occupy Wall Street was extremely horizontalist in a lot of ways, and it was hurt by people literally just not coming to agree on anything, because people would just talk forever.
Of their fellow occupiers. I think my description of consensus in the video was slightly more flexible, as I defined it as a decision-making process founded on consent among members of a group. Accordingly, consensus aims to value every voice and concern, foster an environment where conflict is embraced and resolved cooperatively rather than avoided or dismissed, and find creative solutions that improve upon initial proposals. The consensus process, as I described it, requires commitment, trust, respect, active participation, self-empowerment, and a common goal.
Oh my god, wait!
On consent among members of a group. Accordingly, consensus aims to value every voice and concern.
Oh my god, he's a consensus anarchist? Wait. No. Is he really? Or am I...
Foster an environment where conflict is embraced and resolved cooperatively rather than avoided or dismissed, and find creative solutions that improve upon initial proposals. The consensus process, as I described it, requires commitment, trust, respect, active participation, self-empowerment, and a common goal. It also requires a ton of patience, as the process involves submitting proposals, clarifying questions, and often lengthy general discussions,
or is
where
he,
all concerns are listed and explored,
this?
and consensus is sought after each resolution. If consensus isn't reached, individuals have the option to either stand aside or use their veto to block the proposal. Although I did mention the need for unity of purpose for the group and acknowledge that consensus wouldn't work for all situations, I still carried on the video with the implicit assumption that I was describing an ideal process for a fixed, rigid group. Some of my criticisms of the problems with consensus, such as issues with vetoing, or the need for splinter groups to amplify the voices of marginalized folks within larger collectives, carry that implicit assumption that we're dealing with a fixed polity. Even my concession to majority rule in instances where consensus fails exemplifies that unconscious bias. But free association implies far more fluidity in group formation and composition. It does away with the polity form. In fact, it's a bit out of order to say that a proposal is brought to the group, especially if the group is some centralized entity that has the power to permit or forbid.
So he's saying, like, votes... His anarchism, he's saying you can't vote at all? He's saying under anarchism, there's no such thing as votes, period?
A bit out of order to say that a proposal is brought to the group, especially if the group is some centralized entity that has the power to permit or forbid action within a certain territory. If we're describing a situation of free association, it would be more accurate to describe a group forming around a proposal, aka an existing point of consensus. If that's the case, then there's no need for standing aside or vetoes within the group, just consultation with those outside the group who might have valid concerns, and consideration of what resources are available to accomplish the task. In this context, free association provides the best means to achieve flexible social forms that truly look at women around within a certain proposal is fluidity in group formation and composition. It does away with the polity form. In fact, it's a bit out of order to say that a proposal is brought to the group, especially if the group is some centralized entity that has the power to permit or forbid action within a certain territory. If we're describing a situation of free association, it would be more accurate to describe a group forming around a proposal, aka an existing point of consensus.
Describe a group forming around a proposal, aka... Does anyone have any clue what the fuck he's talking about? But what if some people... Okay, so he's saying that a group... Okay, so I think I understand what he's saying. People form based on consensus, so that's how a community forms, is based on consensus on things.
If that's the case, then there's no need for standing aside or vetoes within the group, just
standing aside or vetoes within the group.
Consultation with those outside the group who might have valid concerns.
Okay, so what if this group that gets together decides, hey, we have a common proposal to impose our will on other people? Because if we imposed our will on other people, we could be rich. We could just be chilling all the time. We could just enslave this other group of people. So he's saying that groups will form naturally based on what people want. So a group that wants to farm will just naturally form, or a group that... I just don't think that makes any sense in terms of being logical. What if a group forms and agrees, okay, let's become slavers, or let's be bandits? You know? I don't understand. If anyone wants to donate to me, I'd appreciate it for going through this suffering. You guys want to send a few bucks my way, every dollar counts, and I'd appreciate it, because, come on, I deserve a few bucks for going through this shit.
And consideration of what resources are available to accomplish the task. In this context, free association provides the best means to achieve flexible...
But, you know, what he's saying here about free association, it's like the group agrees that we're going to work on, like, building a house, right? So, the free association... So, say I'm in the group, but it's like, I don't want to build a house. That's hard work. I'm going to go away. Because free association, I can do whatever the fuck I want. So, I'm going to go away. Goodbye. As you build the house... And then the house is built. In free association, I come back. Hey guys, nice house you got there. Can I live in the house? You guys can't make me not live in the house because it's free association. I have a common agreement with you that I want to live in this house now. It's like, okay, I leave while you build the house, and then when you're done building the house, guys, it's free association. It's free real estate. You gotta let me in. You gotta let me in. Because it's free association. I agree with you guys. I have a common agreement with you guys of wanting to live in the house. People will be lazy. I'm not saying everyone is lazy. I believe most people are not lazy. But this system is so obviously open to exploitation. I mean, it's so obviously open to people not working, to taking advantage of other people. It's so vulnerable to just people being taken advantage of. for their labor. It's just reproducing people's labor being exploited. Right? Or even if someone puts in 20 hours of work in the house and another person puts in 2 hours of work into the house, it's like, it's nice that they put in a little labor into the house, but what about the person who worked their ass off on building the house? They get nothing extra for all that labor they spent in building the house. They get nothing from that. The person that spent 2 hours gets just as much as the person that spent 20 hours. And again, they're very well, especially when you're talking about societies, anarchists. Listen, anarchists, when you're talking about a world where there's 7 billion people and there's no government to organize anything, it would be very easy for people to do absolutely nothing and get away with it, and then use other people's labor. If you want to build a giant city or something as an anarchist, or some giant agricultural project that involves tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, and then you can just leave and then come back when that project is done and easily manage to just kind of slip in. Now, this critique might not be fully developed because I've literally never heard of free association before, so I'm literally going off the top of my head. But I think these are fairly strong critiques.
Social forms that truly benefit their constituent parts. If, for example, the sewage system needs to be repaired, in a situation of free association, there's no need to seek permission from some communal authority. People who are willing to undertake necessary repairs come together on that basis, evaluate what resources are available to accomplish their goals, and take action.
Okay, so now he's actually doing a specific situation.
People who are willing to undertake necessary repairs come together on that basis, evaluate what resources are available to accomplish their goals, and take action.
What if there is no sewage specialist in the area? Do they just call around to other communes until they find a sewage specialist? What if that sewage specialist doesn't want to go and repair the sewage systems? What if they're busy? So someone is saying you couldn't move into the house because they could just beat you up and kick you out and no one would stop them from doing so. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that is an option, but it's like, that doesn't sound like that sounds like a kind of not a great society, you know? I don't know. Like, I thought anarchy was about avoiding violence. I don't know.
Of course, if they wish to avoid upsetting the social equilibrium, it's in their best interest to consult with the people who might be affected by the repairs prior to action and find compromises where necessary. But this is not the same as submitting the activity to the decision of a collective body. Perhaps this process of consultation, problem solving.
This is not the same as.
But this is not the same as submitting the activity.
Submitting their activity to the decision of a collective body.
To the decision of a collective body. Perhaps this process of consultation, problem solving, and conflict resolution can be described as a consensus process in some cases. But of course, not every effort to resolve conflicts or solve problems can be limited to the tradition.
Again, I just want to go back to the idea that under free association, people could come together and decide that they want to participate in an action where they exploit people. And you might say, yeah, I don't know. No, I'm not going to attack FD Signifier. I think he's a good channel, and he doesn't really talk about anarchism. Why would a local community be against their sewage plant being repaired? I I never said that a local community wouldn't be against their sewage plant being repaired. But there could not be a person who knows how to do that. And you need to have systems that are educating people to be able to maintain these systems. Who is going to go to school to be a sewage repair person because that's their love, that's their passion in life? No, they go to do that they go to repair a sewage system as a job because it pays well. Plumber jobs, all these jobs, they pay well. That is why people become plumbers. No one on earth, no one, maybe I'm wrong, but no one to my knowledge willingly wants to deal with human feces. It's a horrific job, but it pays well. That's why people go to school to be a sewage. So under this anarchist system, if I was a sewage guy, I would expect to be compensated pretty damn well. I'm not going to just do it for the good of the community when I could be a poet or a novelist instead, which is the whole thing, the whole problem of anarchy. Everyone wants to be the poet. Everyone wants to be the novelist, the musician, the entertainer. You have to have an incentive, some sort of incentive for people to want to fucking deal with human shit. You need some sort of incentive. Chemical Mind has never heard of scat. That is a very good point. That's a very good point. Okay, maybe some people do want to deal with sewage. Maybe so.
Traditional process of consensus. Beyond that, some problems can only be solved by disregarding consensus. Minorities don't need to find consensus with majorities for permission to retain their autonomy. Ultimately, anarchy is not and has never been about everybody voting for everything everywhere all at once to get anything done. In Worship in Power, which I highly recommend, Galileu's challenges us to accept this more chaotic organization. Chaotic decision-making fosters the recognition that society can function spontaneously as a decentralized network, permits conflict as a healthy force in our lives, encourages a multiplicity of decision-making spaces pervading all moments of life, well beyond the formal, masculine sphere of the Congress or the diktat, and allows different, even conflicting decisions to be made at different points in the human network, while encouraging a collective consciousness so all decision-makers can maximize their intelligence and accordingly harmonize. Humans have an evolutionarily tested ability to utilize chaotic decision-making at a macro scale, and the only people who dispute this are those who wish to permanently infantilize their compatriots so as to control them by monopolizing decision-making in unitary structure.
So show an example show anything close to this where large-scale systems have functioned in this way. Yes, Adrenaline Van, that was me. Like if you're the sewer boy, are you saying the sewer person gets a better house or something? Yes, I actually do believe that. I think that someone who works in sewer systems should have a pretty high quality level of life compared to someone who writes poetry all day, because writing poetry is fun. Most people do not find working in sewage to be fun. So I think it would be fair to have a system where someone who literally wades through human shit and all that stuff is greatly compensated in return for that. Because they're putting a lot of mental stress. It's a mentally stressful job, compared to poetry writing.
Later on in the book, Galileu develops a necessary litmus test for anarchy. If the system that you create is so interchangeable with the existing order that you can take out the assembly, replace it with a tyrant, and the society keeps functioning, then you have failed to truly revolutionize the social fabric. I don't think that we should dismiss consensus. I think we need to interrogate some of the assumptions that would see it become just another means of rule. If consensus stays tied to rigid polity forms...
How the fuck? He's really saying consensus could be another... If everyone votes for something, it's a means of rule?
Then though it will give us practice in egalitarian social relations, we can go much further still in our pursuit of freedom. As Gillis concludes in his piece, truly anarchist approaches to consensus would prioritize making the collectivity organic and ad hoc, This would mean adopting an unterrified attitude about dissolution and reformation, learning new habits and growing new muscles that have atrophied in the totalitarian reference frame of our status world. For consensus to be truly anarchistic, we must be willing to consent upon autonomy, to shed off our reactionary hunger for established, perpetual collective entities. This sentiment is echoed by CrimethInc, as in seeking to answer the question of our responsibilities to each other, they accept that we must create mutually fulfilling collectivities at each level of society, spaces in which people identify with each other, and of course do right by each other. At the same time, we must recognize we will have to reconfigure them continuously according to how much intimacy and interdependence proves beneficial for the participants. When a configuration must change, this need not be a sign of failure. On the contrary, it shows the participants.
I actually like this idea of anarchism more than I like consensus anarchism. I think it's somewhat more viable. I still think it's non-viable, but I think it's like it sort of makes a little bit more sense. But again, I mean, Andrewism is just historically illiterate when it comes to socialist states. I mean, he literally throws all states into one definition. He says these things that are just wrong about socialist states, and I think he would be greatly helped by expanding his horizons beyond just reading anarchist texts and actually reading Black Shirts and Reds and Vijay Prashad and Gabriel Rockhill.
Participants are not competing for hegemony. When exploring what it means to...
Yeah, I mean, even if Marx wasn't talking post-scarcity, even if you could prove that's just truly what he wanted, that Marx was at heart an anarchist, then he was just wrong. I mean, Marx isn't God. He was an incredible thinker, a visionary thinker, but he could also be wrong about things. So, yeah, it's like...
to organize anarchy, we must both consider what the future that we are striving toward might look like, and understand what is required.
I'm sorry if I veered in a sort of toxic direction. I don't want to do that. So I'm sorry if that has somewhat happened. Not my goal.
To accomplish those goals in the here and now. This is what is meant by means and ends. The two cannot be separated. I know that this discussion can also...
But the trolls in chat and stuff, they just got to me.
feel very vague. So let's look practically at how we can agitate for anarchy. One of the proposals that CrimethInc advocates in place of formal sites of centralized decision-making are spaces of encounter, where people of diverse interests can find and connect with others of common concern in accordance with the principle of free association. These spaces of encounter might be created or found in libraries, parks, community centers, cafes, makerspaces, common rooms, schools, or even online. Spaces of encounter might also be developed along existing supply chains on the factory floor, in warehouses, in stores, on farms, or in offices, as part of a radical transformation of labor. All it takes to get the ball rolling is an opportunity. Perhaps an initiating event, for folks to come together, start sharing their offers and needs, and experiment with solutions. On that foundation, the full potential for spaces of encounter can be built.
So it's all just accident. Like, the decisions we come to and the way society is built, it's literally fucking accident. Like, some guy just says, like, you know, we're gonna build this, or we're gonna do this, or we're gonna do that. And then he has to hope that enough people agree, and if they do the thing. But what if people agree to do something that is not good? What if this free association of people who meets together do something that they have a proposal that they all agree on that is, like, harmful?
CrimethInc points to the example of the space of encounter that preceded the demonstrations against the 2001 Free Trade Area of the Americas Summit in Quebec City. Rather than employing an organizational model intended to produce binding central unity that would have participants spending the entire night fruitlessly arguing about goals, strategy, and which tactics to allow, thousands of people in autonomous groups were able to pursue and synchronize their wide array of plans for action. CrimethInc concludes with the recognition that only when we understand ourselves as nodes within dynamic collectivities, rather than discrete entities possessed of static interests, can we make sense of the rapid metamorphoses that people undergo in the course of experiences like the Occupy movement, and the tremendous tremendous power of the encounter to transform us if we open ourselves to it. Finally, returning to the concept of federation, as promised, we can look to Antimonies of Democracy, where Wilbur writes about how federative organization will be the process by which we identify specific social selves, as in interests or needs, and establish their involvement in large-scale collectivities that are formed on the basis of those convergent interests. He specifies that these collectivities would exist on a specifically consultative basis, quite literally to seek and disseminate information or advice as it relates to those interests, with the recognition, where relevant, of expertise. These consultative associations might be organized to collect and relay information related to everything from armed defense, to co-housing construction, to agroforestry. There might be consultative associations with a journalistic focus, and consultative associations with a rewilding focus. They may exist on any scale, depending on specificity of the information needed, from as local as an apartment building, to as far-reaching as a continent, or even the entire globe. Consultative associations can create blueprints, document the available labor and expertise, source resources, and share feedback. Also, that interested and affected individuals and groups can easily access everything they need to make informed decisions. Let me give an example to illustrate what this looks like in the context of Anarchy. A group of builders might organize themselves upon identifying the need for more housing in the neighborhood, or might have that need brought to them in a space of encounter. Following the incentive to be as informed as possible to avoid unnecessary conflict, they will then need to access the information available in the consultative associations they are part of, including referencing any useful pre-existing blueprints, surveying the wants and needs of those seeking housing, identifying the current land, labor, and resource constraints, and identifying any concerns that the neighbors affected by such construction might have. Once they've gathered a satisfactory amount of information, gathered the necessary resources, and addressed any potentially obstructive concerns, they can proceed to build a house. Consultative associations will not exist as distinct and static entities separate from their constituents, but will no doubt overlap and diverge unrestrained by the firm or the polity form. This echoes Kropotkin's description of communes in an economic context in words of a rebel, as he says that economic frontiers do not exist. The zones of production and exchange of various products interpenetrate each other, tangle with each other, impose themselves on each other. Consultative associations can be formed here and now to connect existing projects and disseminate the lessons we learn from them, and to bring together the information and act as necessary to accomplish.
I don't understand how the Zapatistas can't teach people to read, but this system will teach people to read. I mean, people can operate under false pretenses. Like, people can agree by not consensus, but yeah, I just keep thinking the main counter to this argument is, what if people come together on a common desire that is not helpful to other people? What if people come together, led by a charismatic guy who says, like, this lack of state isn't working. We could have so much better than this. Follow my lead. Believe in me. Believe in what I can do. And many people are susceptible to that. And then this person says, believe in me, believe in what I believe. Follow me, I will make us richer, stronger, more powerful. And he builds a larger and larger group, and they become a warlord, something like that. This is how the Mongols and the Tila the Han, they built their empire off of conquering. They said, we are a group, they gave community. They said, we're a group. Now let's go conquer the rest of the world. Let's become rich. Let's pillage. Imagine what we could do. And these are very popular. These are very popular movements because they were effective, because it was like, great. Sounds great. More money, more like wealth, power. We don't have to be poor anymore. We can become rich. I think that's just a huge threat. I mean, Andrewism himself talks about false consciousness. He talks about how people can be misled. He talks about false consciousness relating to people thinking states are good or whatever, right? Can people not have false consciousness under anarchism that states could be good also and unite to make a state? And once that state unites, you're fucked, because states are very efficient at getting stuff done. We see this with the formation of states in ancient societies. These states, they became large, they became powerful, and they subjugated and conquered their neighbors. The Incas, and the stronger the state, the more organized the state is, the bigger military you can build, the better you can conquer.
Schools. How do these concepts fit into library economies? Great question. In case you haven't seen them, in 2022, I made a video on the commons and a video on library economies. I'll try to summarize them both here in the context of everything we have discussed so far. The commons are defined as a common pool resource, or CPR, which is a natural or man-made resource system that benefits a group of people but provides diminished benefits to everyone if each individual pursues their own self-interest to the detriment of others. We must draw further distinction between the resource system and the resource units produced by that system. Resource systems include forests, lakes, fisheries, pastures, and even infrastructure like windmills and the internet, while resource units consist of whatever users appropriate from those resource systems, such as cubic meters of lumber harvested, tons of fish withdrawn and fodder grazed, kilowatts generated, and network bandwidth used. It's important to maintain the renewability of a resource system by ensuring that the average rate of withdrawal does not exceed the average rate of replenishment. The term appropriators refers to those in association who withdraw resource units from a resource system. Appropriators may use the resource units they withdraw, like residents powering their homes or farmers watering their crops, or they may transfer the resource units for others to use, such as a logger sending lumber to an association of builders. Producers are those in association who directly construct, repair, and sustain the resource system itself. In the organization of commons, producers and appropriators are often the same people, but when they aren't, in Anarchy they would still be rather closely associated as a consequence of their mutual interdependence. Groups organized around CPRs will naturally develop norms that guide their behavior and maintain mutual responsibility to each other. In doing so, I believe they may benefit from the guidance of the principles that I've somewhat modified that were originally outlined by Eleanor Ostrom in Governing the Commons. Those are clearly defined boundaries where those involved have a clear sense of the exact structure and characteristics of the CPR, which is part of where a consultative association would provide benefit. Those associations would also serve to monitor the conditions and use of the CPR over time, disseminating information that would concern affected parties so that
And so then people start writing all this stuff down, right, to keep track of it and all this stuff. And then people start realizing, I don't like doing this, but other people do like doing it. So the people that do like doing all of this stuff, they are going to start to gain more authority. Because not everyone is going to want, I guess that's where free association comes in, where they can just leave. I don't know.
that conflicts of varying tolerance can be resolved between individuals and groups, with no single static approach, but a variety of approaches adopted on a case-by-case basis. CPRs would also most likely give rise to spaces of encounter, where agreements about norms developed in compatibility with local conditions can be negotiated. The library economy, or library of everything as I've used it, is a rhetorical means of communicating the concept of the commons as a socialized and participatory organization of resources and distribution of goods and services. It is another way of conceptualizing a potential outcome of free association in anarchy. The library economy is based on three key principles, drawn from Bookchin's work in The Ecology of Freedom: usufruct, the irreducible minimum, and complementarity. Usufruct as a pervasive norm refers to the freedom of individuals or groups to access and use, but not destroy, common resources to supply their needs. This is as opposed to the limitation of access based on exclusive ownership. Personal possessions may always be a thing, but capitalist property certainly should not. The irreducible minimum is the guaranteed provision of the means necessary to sustain life. It is the level of living that no one should ever fall below, regardless of the size of their individual contribution, including access to adequate food, water, shelter, clothing, education, and healthcare. Finally, as a library economy would require a vast reorientation of our principles from the centrality of capital and competition to the centrality of humanity and cooperation, the last core concept of a library economy is complementarity, which can now also be described as unrestrained mutual interdependence made manifest through collective force. Complementarity is a way of looking at non-hierarchical differences within a society as something generative, where each person of whatever skill or ability contributes a small part to an outcome greater than the sum of its parts. Furthermore, our approach to
this is all, interesting and that sounds nice and all that, but again, the Soviet Union uplifted tens of millions of people into an industrialized society, into a better life. China has done the same thing. Cuba has done the same thing. Best of luck, man. I don't disagree with this as like a communist state transitioning from a socialist state. A lot of this, it sounds fine to me. But just establishing this after capitalism, good luck, my friend. Good luck. Best of luck.
To nature must similarly be based in complementarity. Rather than maintaining an antagonistic, dominating relationship with nature, we must strive to find a complementary melding of nature and society, which Bookchin called third nature. If that piques your curiosity, check out those videos I mentioned. Going further with the dissection of authority, the understanding of mutual interdependence, the principles of free association and federation, the critique of democracy and reevaluation of consensus, the practice and ideal of spaces of encounter.
Oh my god, I can't even read
the principles of free association and federation, the critique of democracy and reevaluation of consensus.
Why did he make it impossible to read? I'm not even going to try to read that. That hurts my eyes.
Consensus, the practice and ideal of consultative associations, and the concept of the commons and the library economy in mind, we can now answer the question of how to pursue anarchy. In short, a social revolution that seeks to alter the whole character of society. But what does that mean? People typically envision some massive uprising in the future, akin to popular media's depictions of the French Revolution. But in reality, as anarchists use the term, social revolution refers to an ongoing and intentional transformation of our society, economy, culture, philosophy, technology, relationships, and politics. It is not starting from scratch, but rather utilizing the shell of the old to build the new, taking on a conscious engagement with current conditions, and using the means that are compatible with desired ends. That process might be punctuated with flashy moments where leaps and bounds can be achieved, but much of the real foundations of anarchy are established in the interludes between insurrections. It is not the single, momentous tsunami that shapes the coast, but rather the many small waves that erode the land with time.
He's just like reinventing socialism. You know, it's like, it's a gradual process of slowly, you know, dismantling our perceptions of the state. A gradual process of like coming to, you know, see the world without as not needing a state, of dismantling. He's literally just like reinventing what communists want, which is to build a state that over time sort of disappears anyways. I really feel like Andrewism is like more a libertarian socialist than an anarchist based on this description. Because if he's saying it's gradual, it's like, okay, do you want it to be gradual capitalist? Do you want anarchism to gradually occur through capitalism? Or would you prefer a stateless society to form under a socialist state first? Do you see what I'm saying here? Like, if he thinks it's a gradual process, why not have it be a gradual process in a socialist state, a Marxist-Leninist state? Even if they didn't do a good job of dismantling the state, they're way better than capitalist states, right? They're way, way better than capitalist states in numerous ways. So why not at least have that state and dismantle it? They're provably better in so many ways. I feel like Andrewism is kind of like really like he's just like making like a worse argument for Marx's ideas.
The process of social revolution involves acts of confrontation, such as occupation and expropriation, acts of non-cooperation, such as strikes and boycotts, and acts of prefiguration, such as establishing spaces of encounter, free schools, and alternative economies. If such efforts are effectively networked, they can grow large enough to practically counter the all-encompassing idea and experience of many that there is no alternative to capitalism and the state. I still recommend my video on the topic for a full explanation, with the obvious caveat that I would now challenge my consensus and democracy-limited depiction of popular assemblies and cooperatives as a misrepresentation.
Holy shit! Oh my god! I'm going to read this and summarize what he's saying. Actually, I'm going to go to the restroom real quick, and I'll be back. I can't read this. The words are just too small.
Or perhaps needless restriction of anarchy, which can be more accurately referred to as participatory in general, serving as spaces of popular discussion, activity, and consultation without legislation. The process of social revolution must also involve affinity groups, another term for groups formed on the basis of free association, utilizing the practice of social insertion, which is an specificist term that describes the active involvement of anarchists in mass movements to influence their development in anti-authoritarian directions. By recognizing the interrelation of powers, drives, and consciousness, we can shape the direction of revolutionary change. Powers refers to your power to do something, not power over others, and such powers are continuously determined by both internal and external factors, like your ability to communicate with others or the social relations you're involved in. Drives encompass your conscious and unconscious goals and motivations, which are influenced by external factors and reciprocally affected by your powers. Finally, your consciousness allows reflection, deliberation, and the ability to direct and modify actions. Our consciousness is also contextual and impacts our powers and drives by aiding the development of tools and concepts that enable us to critique societal norms, understand social dynamics, envision alternative social organizations, and organize for change. The powers, drives, and consciousness that people develop are used to either maintain a given social system, change it, abolish it, or replace it altogether. If we want to create an anarchic society, then we need to develop people's ability to self-organize, which will drive them to seek out and develop horizontal forms of organization, which will shape their consciousness about hierarchy and empower them to resist domination, both here and in the future. The question of defending the revolutionary process often begins from a faulty understanding of what anarchist social revolution actually entails. People ask this question with the assumption of a situation akin to civil war. My first response is to clarify, as I just did, what anarchists actually mean by social revolution. Revolution is a constant process that aims to continuously unmake hierarchy, not a flip of the switch or just one.
Bro, he's literally just doing socialism. He's literally just doing state socialism. All right, this is fantastic. This is amazing. He's literally just doing state socialism. It's not. It's a continuous, constant process that aims to continuously unmake hierarchy,
not a flip of the switch or just one switch. Only on that foundational understanding can I answer the question of how anarchists might deal with authoritarian reaction. Quite simply, by the use of organized force. Neither force nor organization, as we established, are intrinsically tied to hierarchy. Social revolution will involve upending the ideology that reinforces hierarchical power, dismantling the institutions that facilitate that power, and defending against the reaction of authorities by people themselves.
There's like no examples in history of like anarchist or decentralized military movements succeeding in war. There's just like no examples. There's no examples. Vietnam is not an example. The Viet Cong were a guerrilla group, but they were well funded, and there was also the NVA, which was very well funded by the Soviet army. It was very well funded by the Soviet army. There's like no examples of anarchist military organizations successfully conducting warfare. The anarchists in Spain, they were crushed. You know, you can say it wasn't good. You can say it was, unjust. But they got their shit kicked in. I mean, they were not successful at all. Oh, and by the way, I'm not super well read on the Spanish Civil War, but most of the military victories, from what I know, were not done by the anarchist groups. They were done by the groups that were given the more organized Spanish Republican armies. The Spanish anarchists were not militarily successful, from what I know.
Self-emancipation is the goal. So building a resilient and liberatory alternative to the status quo will inevitably produce a group of people
That's long-term struggle, permanent, dare I say. So people are just gonna like fight. They're just gonna not there's not gonna be an officer. So it just doesn't fucking make sense, man. You can't have a general who says like, this is our plan. It's just people on the ground. How does that work? It just... Yes, if anyone can provide a source on the anarchist success or failure in the Spanish Civil War in combat, please let me know. Because Andrewism, as he usually does not provide any examples of anarchist military success. I believe there was also like an anarchist movement in like Korea that was also crushed.
driven to jealously guard their own liberty. Once there's a genuine interest in pursuing and defending their freedom, people will choose to fight for themselves and their loved ones.
People will choose.
Own liberty. Once there's a genuine interest in pursuing and defending their freedom,
people will just choose. What if they, first of all, what if they run away instead? They don't fight? Or what if they join the attacking side, as many people do, to save their own skin? Why would they just choose to defend their own freedom if they think there's a better option?
people will choose to fight for themselves and their loved ones. They don't need to be commanded to do so by an authority that will only prove counter-revolutionary to their freedom.
Okay, I'm gonna try to read this, even though it makes the text way too fucking small. Like, come on, dude. Like, holy shit. Their historical successes in Russia and China burst authoritarian regimes, okay, a vague buzzword that means nothing, and doomed the lives of many. I mean, it actually improved a lot of people's lives very greatly. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, is to push the revolution as far as we can within our limits and to spread that revolution elsewhere. Trotskyism confirmed. I mean, anti-authoritarian revolution isn't meant to be confined to one corner of the globe. It's a global affair. Yeah, I mean, this is just a great example of Andrewism just like completely collapsing when it comes to properly analyzing socialist states. I mean, he literally says here he'd rather the capitalism remain than anything different happen if it's not anarchism. Oh, my thing is blocking the bottom. Let me show you the whole quote. He'd rather lose than compromise on his principles for what he calls efficiency and success. Yeah, I mean, this guy is just completely fucking delusional. I mean, it's just idealism. I mean, it's idealism par excellence. It's just complete idealism. He'd rather have his anarchist revolution or things stay the same as they are. Even though there's endless examples of how imperfect states, socialist states, or they call themselves socialists, are better than capitalist states, as we've discussed, especially in my previous stream. This is where he really is out of his element. Like when he talks about free association, he's better because he's read like 80 books about it. But once he even begins to talk about socialist states, he just embarrasses himself. Just completely embarrasses himself.
All that might be needed is a measure of coordination. As I described it earlier, this would just require that individuals, preferably with expertise, consult and facilitate communication between offensive groups that have a shared responsibility to each other and a shared commitment to success. Something I neglected to mention in my video on the state is an observation that Gallows made in Worship Power, which is that colonizing states appointed leaders to the horizontal societies they were trying to absorb. Why? Because hierarchical societies are easier to control and more vulnerable to the conquest of more powerful hierarchies. If a stateless people have no hierarchies that a colonizing state can exploit, then state institutions will need to be provided. Otherwise, the colonizing state has very few possibilities to expand its control beyond attempted genocide or demanded tribute. An ungovernable people cannot be as easily conquered as a people already under the yoke of rule.
Okay. Andrewism has officially gone off the deep end. He has officially and totally become a borderline he's become a borderline flat earther.
Easier to control and more vulnerable to the conquest of more powerful hierarchies. If a stateless people have no hierarchies that a colonizing state can exploit, then state institutions will need to be provided. Otherwise, the colonizing state has very few possibilities to expand its control beyond attempted genocide or demanded tribute.
An ungovernable people cannot be as easily conquered as a people
Ungovernable
already
people cannot be as
under,
easily conquered as a people already
under the yoke of rule. I mean, that is just so drastically ahistorical. It's insane how ahistorical that was. I mean, that is. For example, if we're talking about the Iroquois, like the Haudenosaunee, which was like what inspired Marx's idea of communism and all that, the American Revolutionary War split the Haudenosaunee and they fucking collapsed. This like anarchist society of like 10,000 people at most. They completely collapsed because they couldn't agree on who to side with in the American Revolution. You know, some of the groups that did the biggest resistance against colonialism were highly organized groups. The Zulus, I believe the Zulus were led by a king. It was a kingdom. Zulu Kingdom? Or the Zulu Empire? Yeah. The Zulus famously defeated the British. Jesus, they killed... Yeah, I mean, that was a huge... suffered its worst defeat against an indigenous foe with vastly inferior technology. So that was the British Empire's worst defeat. And it was by the Zulu Kingdom. A standing army! They literally had a standing army! That's how they won. They had an organized, statist, standing army. That's how they beat the British. Andrewism is just completely going in... Yeah, by beat the British, I mean won battles. They still lost. Of course they fucking lost. I mean, like, yeah, no shit. I think one of the big reasons they lost was a Gatling gun also. But they were the best resistors against the British of anyone. They had a organized standing army. And they won with fucking spears and shields. They had some shitty muskets and rifles. Oh my god, they beat the British who had rockets, cannons, and breech-loading rifles, which I believe are like fast-loading, more advanced rifles than antiquated like muskets and shit. So, I mean, Andrewism is just completely... When he's not talking specifically about anarchism, even then, you know, there's problems. But when he starts to talk about anything about history, he just becomes incompetent. He just shows that he doesn't know what he's talking about. The greatest defeat inflicted on the British was caused by an organized kingdom with a standing army. Military reforms. Men were conscripted. They were conscripted into a standing army. And they beat the other less organized tribes. Yeah, they made military innovations as a conscripted, organized standing army. Most of what the British encountered were... I mean, the British also owned states, too, like in India, where they turned all the people against each other and all that. But decentralized tribes were not resisting well against the British. Like, I don't know what the fuck Andrewism is trying to say. Like, decentralized tribes could not resist the British. Like, we see that how it didn't work with the Haudenosaunee. They completely fucking failed. Embarrassingly. No, dude, conscription is not non-hierarchical. You're literally being forced to fight. I mean, that is totally hierarchical. Conscription is being forced to risk your life in war. So yeah, of course they lost in the end, but like they actually put up a better resistance than anyone else, and they were organized under a kingdom, a powerful kingdom. Okay. We gotta finish this.
Part of how we defend ourselves from authorities must involve refusing the seemingly pragmatic introduction of authority. Finally, in responding to the question of defense, we must recognize that just like capitalists don't do the work that produces their capital, authorities don't do the violence that defends their authority. They order others in the form of
Andrewism just thinks that like everyone is just gonna like unite together to fight for the right cause without being told to. It's just idealism.
military or private security to fight for them. Given that subordinates are the ones who bear the cost of protracted conflict, history shows rates of desertion and occasional mutinies that anarchists can potentially take advantage of. Ultimately, the pursuit of anarchy is an unending struggle that requires ongoing analysis and flexible adaptation to ever-changing conditions. There is no single prescription or plan set in stone. We need a diversity of strategies and experiments guided by anarchic principles to see success. I see many new anarchists fall into the trap of limiting their imagination to what has already existed. But it's important to keep in mind that Civil War Spain, Black Army Ukraine, and the Zapatistas are not the boundaries of anarchist possibilities. Historical attempts at anarchist or decolonial social revolutions, while making some significant strides, still fell short, had structural failings, and made strategic...
I identify as both a socialist and a communist. I believe socialist states can do great things, but if a socialist state gets to a level of advancement that the state can disappear and we can have some sort of communist society, some far future post-scarcity society where there isn't coercion and we can do whatever we want, I obviously have no problem with that.
Errors. In Anarchy Works, Gelderloos challenges us to think deeper about our history, raising questions about isolation, alliances, repression, collaboration, and...
But ultimately, we have to operate under the auspices of materialism. We have to be materialists. We have to look at and learn from history and practice.
Impermanence. I recommend engaging with those questions and remembering...
Okay, what are these questions?
...feelings and make strategic errors. In Anarchy Works, Gelderloos challenges us to think deeper about our history, raising questions about isolation.
Anarchy Works. Maybe, okay, let's see. These are all good questions he's asking, and once you actually think about them, the answers become be a socialist.
Alliances, repression, collaboration, and impermanence. I recommend engaging with those questions and remembering that while it's good to look at what works in the past, there's no need to limit ourselves to what works in the past. We in the present must understand that anarchy is something we're striving toward that has yet to ever be achieved. Anarchy is unprecedented. That realization can feel damning to some, but I find it exciting and liberating. If we base our judgment of what is possible only on what we have observed, we are doomed to create nothing new. There was a time when what exists now could not have been conceived, when the divine right of kings seemed inescapable, and yet here we are. We exist at a time with access to more knowledge than ever of what humans are capable of. Something not existent today does not mean it cannot be created tomorrow. Failures of the past do not guarantee failures of the future. Perhaps the anarchist philosophy is obscure now, but that says nothing of its merit for what comes next. Perhaps anarchy can never be achieved, but anyone who favors concrete steps toward free association and against hierarchy is an ally of mine. As Malatesta said, the subject is not whether
Andrewism will literally prefer anarchism never being achieved over that anarchy would never be achieved over a socialist state. I mean, he made that clear. He believes in defeat before anything alternative to capitalism if it's not anarchism, which I think is just very stupid, but, you know.
Tomorrow or within 10 centuries, but that we walk towards anarchism today, tomorrow, and always. I know that this project doesn't interest everyone, for any number of reasons, and as I said in my leftist disunity video, that's a difference in perspective I can accommodate to a point. I don't necessarily need everyone to identify reasons. And as I said in my leftist disunity video, that's a difference in perspective I can accommodate to a point. I don't necessarily need everyone to identify as anarchist yet, but I will do what I can to get people on the road to at least questioning the hierarchical assumptions. I will not compromise my principles, but I also will not refuse to build resilience with others in the face of our global crisis. As a final note, don't trust anyone who claims to have all the answers.
Yeah, what does Andrewism plan to do to guys like me? You know? Like guys who are like, fuck this shit. Like, this is not gonna work.
I'm not an anarchist because I have all the answers or think anarchism answers all my questions. I'm an anarchist because I'm curious to find the answer.
The main difference between communism and anarchism is that communism is the idea of a far future where we have post-scarcity and where, you know, people have... The difference between communism and anarchism is, the main difference is that anarchism doesn't want a transitional state. It believes that you can just go from capitalism to anarchism, which is Andrewism's argument, which is just not materialist, it's not realist, and it's also ignoring how much good socialist states do, even when they fail to transition to communism.
That exist outside the hierarchies I consider responsible for the state of affairs we're in. I'm an anarchist because I see value in pursuing these answers through what I consider the creativity, honesty, and flexibility of the anarchist framework. All power to all people. Peace. A special thank you to Sean Bodley.
Okay, so let's review the questions we had for anarchism. How will global supply lines function? He didn't really talk about that much. How will it be decided who does less desirable jobs like plumbing or janitor work? He didn't really talk about that much. How will you defend yourself from outside threats? Well, he said that anarchist armies are better. This is from what I remember. This was his argument. Better at resisting colonialism than organized armies, without citing a single example. How will the justice system function? He didn't really talk about how to deal with murderers, rapists, or anything like that. He didn't really talk about anything like that. How will large-scale infrastructure projects be built? He didn't talk about large-scale, but he basically said groups will form based on common interests to build stuff, basically. What will prevent people from simply reestablishing a state? Did he talk about this much at all? I don't think he really did. I don't think he did. Maybe I'm wrong. He really did talk about this. Maybe I missed some things. Okay, individual punishments decided by the community. So like community justice, or whatever it's called, community justice. The problem with this is that communities can defend abuses. They can cover up and defend crimes. If someone beloved in a community commits a crime, people might be more inclined to not believe that that beloved person did it. They will cover for them. So if someone beloved kills someone in a car accident, people will be willing to just believe them when they say they didn't do it. They'll be more likely to believe them. So this is very flawed. This is a very flawed system. Means ends unity. He mentioned something about means ends, but I don't really remember what that was referring to. Yeah, as Dinocism says, people don't need to be told to defend their communities, but they do need to be told not to run the fuck away when under artillery fire. Just vote in an officer who will tell you to run away. Well, he doesn't think you should have elected officers, which I think was what the Soviets did. They had elected officers. He doesn't think there should be officers. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He has no fucking clue what he's talking about when it comes to that. Oh man, this was interesting. I like being challenged. Some interesting points, but yeah, I think he mostly, as I predicted, he failed to properly address any of the questions that I posed. Again, if anyone wants to support me financially, you can do through Streamlabs or on Patreon. I greatly appreciate it. But yeah, am I missing anything here? Am I being ungenerous or anything, or missing anything? I think his worst was when he started talking about defense and military and all that. I mean, he said some really ignorant shit when it came to that. Yeah. So, in conclusion, Andrewism is well-meaning, but extraordinarily myopic and limited in his viewpoints, in his perspective, ignoring, dismissing, or several times outright being wrong about examples of socialist state success. Yeah. Less terrible than the last video, but yeah, that's not saying much. I enjoyed this though. I might do more of these because it's interesting to see other perspectives, even though they're incredibly misinformed. But yeah. I'm kind of interested in the globalization video, and I'm sort of interested in the tech video. But yeah, I mean, This is anarchism in practice. This is anarchism in practice, so... Was it a fun stream? If it was, I'm glad, because I'm insecure about my streaming skills. But, yeah. But yeah, I think that is going to be it for tonight. Last call for anyone that wants to donate something to support me. Would greatly appreciate it. But yeah, if you have any last thoughts, leave them, and then I will end the stream. Lots of fun, comrade. Thank you. I don't really have a schedule. I didn't even plan to do these streams until yesterday when I stumbled on the Andrewism video and I was like, well, maybe I'll do this on stream. So it's pretty spontaneous. I don't really have a schedule, but I will link the Discord to people because that's where I announce in advance when I'll be streaming. Let me see. How do I find a link? Thank you, Pickles123. Much appreciated. Thank you for your contributions. I'm trying to figure out how to share this Discord. Server setting. What the frick? Why is it so hard? Okay, maybe here? Okay, invite people. Okay. Alright, I'm dropping the link, the invitation link here. You also have some banger Googling skills. How the hell are you this fast? I'm fucking terminally online, dude. Like, you don't understand. Like, all I do is I play video games, or I like read shit or listen to shit, and I look shit up. So I guess, and I write a lot, so I guess I'm fast typing. I don't know. Thank you though. When will you debate Andrew? I'd be happy to. I'd love to. I would absolutely love to do that, because I don't think that, I think I could heavily challenge his preconceptions by citing facts and evidence. So I would love to do that. I'd love to debate any anarchist. And I won't say that I'd do perfect, or I wouldn't, be challenged as well. But I think the facts are ultimately on my side. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident in that regard. Appreciate your hard work. Love your leftist meme videos. Thank you. I'll probably release a few more, and then it's gonna be done, because I just can't find any more memes I think are funny. There's plenty of thank you, Pride Tunes. Much appreciated. Seriously, I really do appreciate that. What was I saying? I forgot what I was saying. But oh yeah, I'm running out of funny memes. So not gonna do too many more of those. There's so many funny text memes or picture memes that aren't videos, but I have scoured the depths of the internet for funny leftist meme videos. I have looked everywhere, and I'm running low. So you guys have to make more memes and put your credentials in the meme so it's easy to credit. I watched part of that non-compete video and it was good. He talked about how the wooden egg, but I forget what the analogy was, but it was quite interesting. But I don't think debate is pointless. I don't think that. Debating Vosh is pointless. That's who you don't debate. That's who you don't debate is fucking Vosh. But a good faith interlocutor is more worth debating. Someone in good faith. But maybe I should watch Don Compete's video on stream or something. Finish it. It's a long video. Do a stream of Socialism for All. That'd be cool. Socialism for All is kind of intimidating, I feel like. I don't know, for some reason. Yeah, thank you to everyone who joined the Discord, and hello. You will get... I will always make sure to notify when I'm going to stream in advance. So at least a little bit in advance. Maybe not a lot, but just some warning. Chemical Minded on the deprogram one. Yeah, I talked about this last stream. I'd love to do that if they'd have me on. That'd be super cool, yeah. I did do an interview with my friend, if you want to check that out. Oh, it's not even coming up. His channel is so small. Okay, it's literally, that's hilarious. What? Okay, well... Good old YouTube. I don't know what to say. So he doesn't say non-compete, doesn't say debating is useful, useless always. Yeah, I think that's what I remember from the video. But yeah, his videos are very good. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of don't want to end the stream because I had fun, and I don't know. I feel like I've come to like streaming more, and I have come to see more of the appeal of it. You know, in some ways, it is nice in some ways. So maybe I will do streaming more because I know a lot of people really wanted me to stream more, but I never felt comfortable doing it. But maybe I will do more streaming. Let's open the vodka bottle. Yeah. I imbibe in other ways besides that. And that's another thing is it's like, am I going to do a, I've been thinking if I should do like a 10K, like, Q&A kind of thing where I like answer questions in the video. I don't know. Because I was gonna release these videos called Self Crit September, but I didn't get to that. Too busy. Even though the scripts are basically done, so I might release those on the Patreon for free as just like essays. Yeah, Q&As are always fun. Yeah, I could do a community post, like asking for people to ask me questions, or I could do that in the Patreon. I could do it like where if you're a patron, I will guarantee to answer a question. But everyone else can also ask a question, and I will try to answer as many questions as possible. Because I gotta make some fucking money somehow. B shits on the people who are media critics. You mean like Big Joel type people? Yeah, I mean I don't like those people either who literally just the only thing they do is be like, you know, like here's why Shrek is like Marxist, or here's why you know, this conservative cartoon is bad. It's like, no shit. Like, you're fucking useless. This is useless content. It's fun entertainment, but it's like, I don't know. It's fine. It's just not like Jubilee. React to Jubilee. Yeah, that's what Hassan does. That might actually be fun. Yeah. Is being fat a choice? Oh my god. Can one cop defend himself against 20 criminals? What the fuck? That sounds fascinating. That's fascinating. And he's got the thin blue line on his shirt. Oh god. Can you spot the Republicans? And then, oh my god, dude. I could not survive this. Can one woke teen survive 20 Trump supporters? That's incredible. Look at his face. That's amazing. Can 20... Oh my god, these are so funny. I think just looking at the thumbnails is like entertainment enough. see. Top 10 must-see middle ground moments. Ranking Asians. Yeah, I'll be honest, guys. I don't think I want to do that. I don't think I want to do that. But all right, I'm gonna head out. Take it easy, everyone.